Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. I pull onto the gravel shoulder under a sky so dark it feels like I'm driving into a void. The county road stretches ahead, straight and unlit, flanked by cornfields that rustle with an unseen wind. My cruiser's engine ticks as it cools, and I sit for a moment, hands resting on the wheel, listening to the emptiness. No dispatch calls, no distant headlights, just the cicadas droning like a swarm in my eardrums. I slide the baton and radio into their holsters, flip on my flashlight and step out into the humid night. The air tastes of ozone and damp earth. I flash the light across the field edges, where tall stalks bend and straighten but never break, like sentinel arms waving at nothing. Often, I drive this stretch and wonder if anyone's ever been out here after dark. Tonight, I'm about to find out. A parked car appears ahead, its hazard lights blinking on the shoulder. I jog forward, flashlight cutting through the black, heart thumping in cadence with the distant hum of crickets. The driver's door is wide open, hanging at a strange angle. No interior light, no silhouette of a person. Nothing but an empty seat muffled in shadows. I call it in. Unit 22 on County Road 17. Possible abandoned vehicle. Approaching now. My voice is steady, professional, but inside I taste a tightness I can't shake. I never trained for ghosts, but I trained for missing people. And this feels like someone vanished on me. I circle the back of the car, flashlight under the door's lip. The engine is off now. The headlights are drained to dim orange groans. I angle the beam at the license plate. It's missing. Clip clops in my chest as I radio for a plate check. Fingers tingle on the grip of my flashlight as I peek through the tinted rear window. Backseat empty, but on the floorboard, something dark sticks to the mat. My breath hitches when I see crumpled paper towels, thickly stained. Not bright red, but the brown-black of dried blood. I shift my collar uncomfortably. No one leaves blood in plain sight. My own voice sounds distant as I call backup. Dispatch, send me another unit. Description: one abandoned unplated sedan with possible bloody interior. Origin, unknown. I give our markers and slump against the car's trunk, sliding down until I'm seated on the gravel. The cold of the steel seeps through my uniform back, mixing with sweat at my temples. I tap out a text to my wife. Late, something's off. I'll call you in an hour. It hangs unsent. I delete it. Too many times I've described something's off without ever coming home on time. I tuck the phone back into its holster. The stillness presses in. My breathing slows, and I notice the subtle sounds, the rasp of a moth against the headlight, an owl hooting miles away, the faint crunch of gravel behind me. First turn. A shape flickers at the edge of my light's reach, just beyond the ridge of corn. My hand snaps to my holster, even though I haven't drawn my weapon yet. Hello, I call, voice edged. Nothing. The cornfield seems alive, rustling closer, as though it's breathing. I stand and shine the beam toward the field. It catches a path of mud through the rows. Footprints, full size, pressed deep. They head into the field but only a dozen paces, then trail off as though whoever made them vanished. I lean forward, flashlight skirting over broken leaves and dried corn husks. Every stalk looks the same. I follow, heart thumping, until the field opens onto an old service road leading to a defunct grain elevator. The moon peeks through ragged clouds, illuminating the rusted steel towers. My breath clouds for a moment. No sign of a person. A low click echoes behind me. I whip around. The driver's door slams shut on its own, metal smacking against the frame. For a heartbeat, I think I heard breathing, slow, deliberate. My hand trembles on the flashlight as I lift it. The car sits idle, its blind windows reflecting the beam back at me. I swallow. My training takes over. I approach the sedan cautiously, throat dry. I grip the door handle and pull. The interior light flickers on, revealing seats soaked in darkness. I point the beam at the glove compartment, cracked open, papers splayed out. I snap a picture. Then, at the far corner of the front seat, something moves. A foot. Clad in a white sneaker, stained and torn. I jump back, silent curse on my lips. Slowly, I crouch to look inside. That sneaker rests on the edge of the floor mat, heel tipped upward as if someone sat and then slid the leg free. I shine the light under the seat. There, a hand, pale, limp, fingers splayed, no blood, but the flesh is mottled, cold. I slide my glove on and edge in. The second I touch it, a copper twinge sparks at my fingertips. The skin peels away easily from bone. I suppress a retch, drop my gaze to my boots. The world tilts. A police car shouldn't hold a dead person who didn't suspect he'd be found. My radio buzzes static. Then, Unit 22, do you copy? I croak. Yeah? I've got remains. Need coroner and homicide. I give our coordinates and hang up. My light shifts on its own, catching headlights approaching. Backup arrives, 2 cruisers, a K9 truck. Voices call out, torches scan the darkness. I stand, shoulders sagging, and nod at the sergeant, stepping out. He moves in first, gentle but firm. I retell what I saw, clutching at memory. The footprints, the field, the car's door slamming, the stiffened hand. His gaze flicks toward the corn, as though bracing for something to step out. He radios for the dog. Within minutes, the German shepherd's paws crunch in the gravel. It sniffs the air, nose twitching, then bolts toward the corn rows. I sprint after, boots sucking mud with every step. The dog's silent until it stops, ears pricked, hackles raised. I reach the field's edge, the dog stares into the stalks, rigid. I call its name, no response. It barks once, feral and sharp, then plunges into the darkness. I hesitate, then follow. The corn tunnel closes around me. I hear the dog's pause, then nothing. I click my light higher. Years of patrol taught me that sometimes silence is more dangerous than noise. I stumble forward, and there it is. Footprints in the mud again. They lead to a fallen husk pile, discolored dark. The dog's bark echoes, nearer now, sharp. I spin. The flashlight beam catches a glint, metal, buried in the pile. Before I can process, the dog snarls behind me. I whirl, flashlight trembling. There's a shape crouched at the exit of the tunnel, backlit by the cruiser's red and blue flicker. I raise my voice, shaking. Police! Come out where I can see you. The shape doesn't move. And then, a whisper so close I feel it brush my ear. You weren't invited. I freeze. The dog barks again, frantic. My heart staggers. The figure fades back into the stalks as headlights wash the tunnel in jerky strobe. I blink, chest heaving, and step forward. But there's nothing. Only the broken husks and that single metal trinket, half buried. I bend and pick it up. A tarnished police badge, number melted beyond recognition. My own heart jolts. I don't carry this number. I hold it tight, pulse aching. Then I hear voices calling my name from the field's edge. Backup's searchlights swing over the stalks, carving through the darkness. I tuck the badge into my pocket and stand, hands at my sides. I follow the voices out, letting the dog crowd between me and the dark. Once I reach the shoulder, I keep the badge hidden inside my coat. The coroner's van arrives, engines idling. I watch the forensic team comb the car, now cordoned off behind crime scene tape. Beyond, the cornfield is silent again, shadows pooling where the dog raced. I glance back, unease creeping under my skin. Later, I'll write the report. I'll call the remains unidentified. But tonight, in the hush of my empty house, I won't sleep, because I heard that whisper. And in the dark, I still feel the weight of that badge in my pocket, warm against my side, like a reminder that somewhere out there, someone knows I came. I wake before dawn, unable to stay still. My bedroom feels too small, the walls pressing in like they're leaning closer, listening. I slide out of bed and pad to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to see the streetlight's cone slicing through morning mist. I taste stale coffee from last night's shift at the edge of my senses. I'm still wearing my uniform pants beneath my sweatpants. Habit, reflex. I rub my face, trying to blur away the memory of that whisper, and fail. The badge weighs heavy in my coat pocket, even through fabric. I can feel its cold curve against my hip. I can't bring myself to toss it in the evidence locker. Something inside me twisted the moment I pocketed it. It's not mine. I know that, but I can't let it go. Not yet. I head downstairs to the kitchen, flicking on the light. The hum of the refrigerator sounds too loud, too judgmental. I fill a cup from the pot, last night's brew, bitter and cold. I sip it. The taste sharpens my thoughts. I'm replaying every step, the field, the husks, the dog's bark, that shape, the crunch of mud, the slick floorboard in the sedan, and the badge. My phone buzzes. It's the sergeant. "You in yet?" His text. He wants the preliminary report. I stare at the screen. I can't type. "Sergeant, we found an unidentified corpse and a stolen badge." It feels like I'd be confessing to something beyond protocol. I delete the text. I close my eyes and whisper to myself, "I'll write it after coffee." I grab my keys and head back out. The air's still damp. My cruiser sits in the driveway, bumper crusted with last night's mud. I climb in, the seat cold against my back. I shove the badge into the glove compartment, wedging it between the manual and the inspection papers. It rattles when I close it. I switch on the dome light and check, no other sign. I pull out, headlights cutting through the mist, and head to the station. At roll call, the sergeant eyes me before I've even sat down. "You look like hell," he says. Understatement. I nod and listen to the briefing. Traffic accidents, a report of loud music down on Main Street, a prowler's scare in Westmont. They don't compare. I glance at the clock. The forensic team got there before dawn, processed the scene, and already sent the sedan and grain elevator back to evidence. They call it no leads. They found no prints, no DNA beyond the remains, no sign of the figure I saw. It's a tidy little case, an abandoned car, an unidentified victim, closed for now. I'm handed a sheet. "Preliminary findings," the detective says. He avoids looking at me. The sheet lists blood-stained interior, unidentified male remains, no witnesses, vehicle stolen from Kansas. It reads clinical. No part mentions the absence of the driver, the footprints in the corn, or the slave-like hush that fell when I approached the barn. I tuck the form into my binder and force a nod. "Anything else?" I ask. "Nope," he says. "That's all we got." He turns away and clips the form to his folder. I remain standing, fingers flexing on the binder's edge. I need more. I need something. After roll call, I linger. The sergeant closes the briefing room door and lifts an eyebrow. "You okay?" he asks, almost gentle. I shrug. "I found a badge in the field," I say quietly. "Doesn't match any in our system." His face darkens. "Show me." I unzip my jacket and bring out the tarnished badge. Its number worn smooth, edges chipped. He takes it, inspects it under the fluorescent lights. "This is old," he says. "I've never seen one like it. It's not department issue." He hands it back. "Hold on to it. I'll run it through abandoned property, old retirements, all that, but don't lose it." I nod, pockets heavy again. The rest of the morning drags. I process reports, answer calls, direct traffic at a minor fender bender. Every time I close my eyes for a second, I see that fallen husk, the glint of metal beneath it. I taste the crunch of gravel in my mind and hear the dog's bark echoing through corn aisles. My coffee cup sits empty, but my throat still burns. I refill it twice, no relief. At noon, lunch break, I drive back to the scene anyway. It's protocol to stay away. Chain of evidence, contamination, but I need to look for something I missed. I park a few hundred feet from the grain elevator, cut the engine, and step out. The stale scent of rain lingers. It's quiet, only distant highway hum. I shine my flashlight around the elevator's base. The ground is swept clean by the forensic team. No husks, no footprints, no sign of the trench I followed. The dog trot of my boot heels on concrete is soundless here, swallowed by the broad metal walls. I climb the stairwell to the catwalk, careful not to leave prints. Up top, the view stretches across fields and county roads. I imagine I should feel advantage here. Sentry position, but I feel only vulnerability. A place this high should give perspective, but I only see emptiness. I run my hand along the rusted guardrail. The texture reminds me of that glove's stitching. Then I hear it. A faint creak below, metal on metal. I freeze. The elevator shaft yawns beneath me. I aim the beam down, rings of darkness. No platform, no ladder, nothing. But that creak again, like someone leaning against the interior wall, even though no one is inside. My pulse spikes. I climb down quickly, heart hammering. My hand slips on the rail, and I catch it, skin scraping on rust. I wince, but don't stop. Back on the ground, I wipe my palm on my pants. I want to believe it was a gust, a simple shift, until I feel a breeze swirl at my jacket collar. Unnatural. No wind today. I spin, flashlight carving through empty space. No shape, no movement, just fields. I back away, leaving the elevator behind. My reflection in the cruiser's door glass is pale and hollow-eyed. I grip the door, steady myself. What am I doing here? I lock the door and drive off before my own fears swallow me. Back at the station, I shove the badge into my locker instead of handing it over. My sergeant's words echo. Hold on to it. I slip it between a sweater and an old hat, out of sight. But out of mind, this is not. I sit at my desk, burying myself in paperwork, but my nerves fray with every knock on the door. When the detective slides in with a file, I jump in my chair. "Badge is clear," he says. "No record. Looks like it was made privately, a novelty or retired collector's piece." I stare at him. "So it's a toy?" I ask. He shrugs. "Doesn't belong to any department, we've got nothing." He stands, tucks the file under his arm, and leaves. The door clicks. I lean back, staring at the ceiling tiles. By the time my shift ends, dusk is falling again, painting the sky in bruised purple. I drive back toward County Road 17, drawn by some magnet in the dark. The fields glisten with dew, the roadside ditches are deep shadows. I slow to 35, white lines rushing beneath me. I know every bump, every curve. Tonight, it all feels alien. I pull over where the sedan sat. No tape, no markers, nothing. I step onto the shoulder and back down to the tree line. I click the flashlight on and sweep across the field edge. No, footprints, but I shine lower into the grass and find a flattened circle where the tall stalks were pressed down. I kneel and push aside stalks. A small chain, half buried, its other end gone missing. I glance around, stomach twisting. I pull it free. It's the rest of the trinket I pocketed before, the chain that belonged to that melted badge. I hold both pieces, the badge, bent and tarnished, and this chain, cold and weightless. They belong together. They came from the same source, from the same someone. A car horn flashes behind me. I jolt, chain clattering. I tuck both into my jacket pockets and climb back in my cruiser. My hands shake on the wheel as I start the engine. The beam of my headlights cuts through the field's edge, straight into the dark. I ease back onto the road, lights off, and drive away. I still don't know what I interrupted, who that badge belonged to, or why someone would leave pieces of themselves behind. But I carry those fragments now. And every time I close my eyes, I see the corn parted, the dog's stance, the badge shimmering in the darkness. My dreams were a tangle of rusted metal and broken glass. I'd wake choking on sweat, the taste of damp earth in my mouth, the badge and chain burning a hole in my coat pocket even while I slept. Weekdays blurred into weekends. I showed up at roll call wearing the same haunted look, answered the same routine calls, took the same cup of lukewarm coffee, but always with one eye on the clock, waiting for the moment I could slip away and chase ghosts again. I went back to the coroner's office to inspect the remains report, but the form offered nothing but sterile classifications. Adult male, approx, age 35 to 45, time of death indeterminate, cause pending. No fingerprints, no DNA match, no identity, no trace of the missing driver. It was as if he'd evaporated, body parts and all, into thin air. Days later, I found myself logging onto an obscure online forum dedicated to missing person badges. Collectors sharing photos of decommissioned patches, retired officers trading memorabilia. I made a throwaway account and posted a picture of the tarnished badge, asking if anyone recognized the number. Almost immediately, the post was flagged and removed. I created another account, more discreet, and uploaded the image again, describing what I'd found. A badge that looked old, melted, almost organic in shape, with no department affiliation. A user replied, "Looks like one of those Masonic Lodge novelties from the 1920s. Could be brass, maybe estate sale find." My heart sank. That meant whoever dropped it had intended someone to find it. It meant it was meant to be discovered and then erased, like a breadcrumb trail. I clicked reply and typed, "If it's from an estate sale, why leave a body part behind too?" No answer. I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling fan spinning overhead. The thin wires of my overhead light cast shifting shadows on the walls. I felt watched. My own bedroom had become a scene of interrogation. I pushed the sheets off, swung out of bed, and flicked on the lamp. The chain and badge lay on the nightstand, half hidden beneath my phone charger. I stared at them, hand itching to touch the metal again, to feel its cold weight and remind myself it was real. My reflection in the dark window was a man unraveling, a veteran cop out of his depth. That evening, I volunteered for overtime, a chance to get back to the scene. The county agreed, citing budget cuts that left us short-handed. I ended up on a double shift, finishing patrol at 4 a.m. Instead of going home, I drove to the abandoned grain elevator one more time. The sign at the entrance hummed, "Dover Grain and Milling Company." It looked freshly painted, incongruous against the rusted metal walls. The driveway was gated now. They'd installed a chain-link fence since the coroner's team left. I hopped the fence easily, heart pounding. The place should have been locked down, but nothing made sense anymore. I clipped a flashlight to my belt, radio turned off. I moved between shadows toward the silo door, half expecting it to open on its own. Instead, it stayed shut, heavy and silent. I ran my hand over the padlock, cold and unyielding. I crouched to shine my light under the gap at the door's bottom. Something small and smooth lay there. A key? It looked like a rusted skeleton key, the sort you'd see on a basement door. I knelt and picked it up. The metal was matte, no shine, like it had been buried for decades. My breath caught. I held it between thumb and forefinger, weightless, and realized there are no locks on cornfields. There are no keys to fields. It didn't belong. My radio crackled far off, someone checking in. I muted it quickly, pulling the key into my palm and pocketing it. I glanced around. The yard was empty, the fence a barrier only to those who cared about barriers. I walked the perimeter, tracing my flashlight beam over the walls. Near the base of the silo, I saw scuff marks along the concrete, vertical scratches like someone clawed at the wall from the inside. They ran 8 feet up before suddenly stopping. I crouched. Under the lowest scratch, the ground was pitted, like something heavy scraped there, dragged along. I pressed my fingers into the dirt. Black oil pooled in the grooves. My stomach flipped because I recognized that slick smell. Hydraulic fluid. Machinery oil. Something about that told me the barn wasn't as abandoned as the records said. The wind picked up, rattling the metal siding. I spun. A shape moved along the ridge of the roof, small and shadowed. For a heartbeat, I was sure. Someone stood up there looking down at me. Then it vanished. My pulse slammed. I stepped back, kicked at the dirt. There it was again. A footprint, small, dusty, like a child's boot pressed into mud. But the silo sat on concrete. There was no mud here. My mind raced. Was someone up there watching me? Or did I imagine it? The flashlight's beam trembled in my hand. I stalked the base of the tower until I found a service hatch. Bolted, but with only 2 screws in place. The other holes were empty, stripped. Someone wanted this locked, but couldn't be bothered to replace the hardware. I tried the handle. It gave a fraction, then stopped. I leaned in and caught a whiff of stale air, dank, like an unventilated crawlspace. My uniform collar prickled with goose flesh. I turned away, heart clamoring. I drove home in silence, the key burning a hole in my coat pocket. At home, I parked in the driveway, headlights off, and sat in the dark. My reflection in the windshield showed hollow eyes. I texted my sergeant a curt note. Found key. No owner. Want to talk? He replied instantly, Station. Now. I shut off the engine and climbed out, boots sinking into soft earth. I walked inside, coat slung over my shoulder, and forgot to lock the door. He waited in the briefing room, arms crossed. He looked tired, like me. I laid the key, badge, and chain on the table. He picked up the key first, jingling it between fingers. This, he said, trailing off. Why bring this here? I shrugged, because someone wants me to. I waved at the badge. They left that too. He traced a finger over the chain. You're telling me, he looked at me, eyes narrowed, that you stole evidence? No. My voice was low. I removed what was abandoned. I followed breadcrumbs. He sighed and sank into a chair. You're chasing ghosts, Johnson. He stared at me, then at the objects. Maybe it's time to let this go. Let go. To me, it felt like giving up a part of myself. I couldn't. I turned and left without another word, pocketing the key again. The coroner's office called the next day. They'd ID'd the remains through dental records. An out-of-state drifter named Frank Olson reported missing 6 months ago near Wheaton, Kansas. No phone calls, no next of kin, nothing else in his belongings beyond a faded photograph of a small boy and a woman. The kind of photo you keep in your wallet to avoid forgetting faces. The picture was creased and burnt at the edges. I memorized the faces. The boy looked no older than 8. The woman's eyes were hollow, devoid of warmth. I'd seen those eyes before, in my mirror. That night, I opened the fence at Dover Grain and Milling, using the skeleton key. The lock snapped smooth under its tooth. I slipped inside, heart drumming. I crept toward the silo hatch, shoved the key in, and it turned with a satisfying click. I lifted the hatch, it groaned, and crawled inside. My flashlight showed a ladder riveted to the metal wall. The rungs climbed straight up into darkness. I paused, every instinct screaming to leave, but I climbed. The shaft was narrow, the ladder slick. I ascended, each rung a reminder of how far I'd come into this. Halfway, I heard the metal creak. Behind me? I froze, then shone the beam down. Nothing. I kept going until the beam pierced a square of faint light above. I reached the top and stepped onto a mezzanine catwalk I'd never seen before, inside the silo. The air was thick, musty, and the beam revealed heaps of old seed corn, packed into burlap sacks. But something glittered beyond. A row of photos pinned to the wall, curling at the edges. I ran the light over them, faces I recognized from the missing persons board. Frank Olson's photo, with a smile that looked stranger in black and white. Next to it, an older badge, almost identical to the one I found, engraved with Sheriff's Department, Airattatorlairatta Nanga below, a child, 8 years old, same boy from the wallet photo. Then a third picture, a man in uniform, hat tilted, eyes blurred. I flicked the beam across the images again. My pulse roared. A sound behind me, a soft footstep on metal grating. I spun, flashlight bobbing. The photos fluttered. A figure dissolved into the shadows. Tall, gaunt. For a moment, I thought I saw that same melted badge pinned to his chest. Then he was gone, leaving only a scrabble of burlap cloth rustling. I stumbled back, breath catching as the ladder's rungs seemed impossibly far below. I scrambled back down, every muscle on fire. I burst through the hatch onto the ground, the key slipping from my numb fingers. Before I could catch my breath, the silo door below slammed shut with a finality that echoed in my bones. I froze, chest heaving, and realized this wasn't about evidence or protocol anymore. It was something else. A call from the past, a warning. I turned toward the fence but paused. In the dark field beyond the fence line, 2 headlights approached, one low and wide, the other high and thin, closing in rapidly. I crouched behind a sack of seed corn, heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. The headlights swung over the silo, then passed me by. Engines idled outside the fence. 2 voices filtered in. "Dispatch, you still there?" "Yeah, I'm here. Something's wrong." My sergeant's voice. He sounded panicked. "We're heading in." I pressed myself flat, sweat gluing my uniform to burlap. My mind raced. If they see me, here, trespassing, with this badge and old key, they'll question my sanity. They'll try to pull me out. They'll lock me away before I can find the answers. I held my breath. The voices passed beneath the mezzanine. I heard boots on gravel, then the gate clanked open. Footsteps faded toward the silo door but didn't come back. Silence swallowed the yard again. I slipped away into the cornfield, winding between stalks bent low. My flashlight stayed off. I clutched the badge and key to my chest, weaving through the rows until I reached the gravel shoulder. I paused, chest heaving. Silhouettes of trees stood as silent witnesses. I stepped onto the road and looked back once. The silo's shape was swallowed in darkness, but I felt its eyes on me. I got in my cruiser, doors creaked as I shut them, and the engine roared to life. I drove off with the chain in my pocket and the haunting faces on my mind. Behind me in the field, I swear, I heard laughter, soft, childlike, and echoing across the rows. And I knew I was right where they wanted me. I didn't sleep that night, or any night since. When I finally pulled off the road and into my driveway, the engine idled and cooled without me noticing. My hands wouldn't let go of the wheel, as if the car itself was the only safe place left. I sat there, headlights washing the garage door in dull orange, and I realized I'd become as hollowed out as that silo. Before I opened the door, I checked my pockets, the badge, the chain, the skeleton key, proof that I'd trespassed, but also proof that someone had guided me here. Someone was playing me, feeding me evidence in increments. At home, the porch light was off. It didn't feel like home anymore. I fumbled for my keys in the dark, braced myself, and stepped inside. The house was quiet, every floorboard creaking beneath my weight. I flicked on the hall light. Shadows stretched across the walls. Too long, too sharp. I set the badge and key on the entry table, next to the stack of unopened mail. My uniform pants still damp with sweat, I trudged to the kitchen for water. The faucet dripped. 1, 2, 3, too loud. When did the house learn to imitate the ticking of time? I stared at my reflection in the window. Eyes bloodshot, cheeks gaunt, uniform shirt stained where I'd pressed my badge against my chest. I blinked. Behind me, in the darkened hallway, I thought I saw movement, a shape too quick to be my own. I spun, but there was nothing. I exhaled so hard my chest burned. I ran my hand along the countertop, fingertips brushing chipped paint. For a moment, I imagined the same child's laughter from the field, echoing in the sterile hall. The thought made my stomach plummet. I forced myself to the living room. The couch cushions were rumpled, though I hadn't sat there in days. The lamp beside it was on, though I was certain I'd left it off. I flicked it off. It clicked once, then died. In the corner, where the end table held a family photo, my wife and 2 kids smiling at the zoo, I felt a pang so sharp it nearly buckled my knees. I hadn't touched that photo since I started chasing shadows. Their faces stared back at me, frozen in happiness I threatened to lose. I picked up the photo and turned it over. On the back, scrawled in pencil, "You're next." No other mark, no date, no name. My heart thudded. The photo slipped from my fingers and landed face up again. The glass cracked, thin fracture lines spiderwebbing from center to edge. I stared at it, hand trembling. I'd never been to that zoo. I'd never touched the photo. But the broken glass was real. I left the picture on the floor and fled upstairs. My bedroom door was ajar. No one else in the house. I pushed it closed, locking it, then knelt beside my bed. Underneath the mattress, I'd hidden the badge, just in case. I pulled it out, the metal cold against my palm, and held it up, to the dim light. Faded engraving, melted edges, a number that didn't belong to me. The chain drooped from the bottom. I traced its curves with a thumb, and a single rivulet of oil dripped from the badge onto my fingers. Machine oil. I wiped it on my pants, smelled it, musty, pungent. That smell had been at the silo. My phone buzzed. I stared at the screen. Unknown caller. I hesitated, then answered. Silence, then static. Then, faint and distant, a child's voice. "You found my badge." The line went dead. My blood ran cold. I dropped the phone. It skidded under the bed, and I heard it tumble against the frame. I realized I couldn't stay in that bed, couldn't lie under that roof. I grabbed my jacket, tossed the badge and key into an inner pocket, and headed back downstairs. The front door was unlocked. I didn't lock it. I walked out onto the porch. The night was still, the mist heavier now. I breathed it in, sharp and wet against my lungs. I got back into the cruiser. This time, I didn't pull away. I sat dark, engine off, headlights off, windows down. I stared into the cornfield, its rows melting into black. I half expected to see eyes reflecting in the stalks. Instead, I saw the fence. The grain elevator loomed behind it, silent. The night pressed in around me so heavily I could almost touch it. I remembered the photos pinned inside the silo, faces of the missing boy, the drifter, the officer from 1904. I remembered the soft whisper, "You weren't invited." I realized then that I had answered the invitation. I had become part of their story. My heartbeat felt small and futile. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the skeleton key. Under the pale dashboard light, it looked different. Longer shaft, sharper teeth. I rotated it, curiosity pulsing like a second heartbeat. What if there were another lock? Another door I hadn't tried yet? Another secret room? A horn blared. I jumped. The car behind me flicked its high beams on and off. A white pickup idled, too far for me to recognize the driver. But I recognized the feel of a tail. Someone following me again late at night, waiting for me to step out. I closed my eyes and exhaled, clouds drifting from my lips. When I opened them, the pickup's lights had turned off. I should have driven home. I should have gone to the station and confessed to all of it. Trespassing, stealing evidence, reckless obsession. But I stayed. I pressed the key's tip against the ignition switch and it slid in. The key didn't fit. I tried again, harder. The switch clicked. The engine turned over without my own key. I sat in the sudden roar of the motor, heart slamming. The steering wheel turned on its own. The cruiser rolled backward, slowly reversing off the porch and onto the gravel. The door opened. My door. But no one got out. The seat creaked as though someone had shifted. The headlights flicked on. High beams, despite my dim setting, and the engine revving as though impatient. I shot forward, hand to the wheel, and the lights went out. Engine died. Silence reclaimed the night. The door slammed. I swear I heard it, though I never got out. My hands shook. I felt the key in my pocket, buried under the badge. I thought of the boy's laughter, echoing in the rows, and of the whisper in the tunnel. I thought of my wife's face, the crack in the photo glass. I realized then I was no longer the hunter. I was the hunted. And there was no locking them out. No resetting the engine, no turning off the lights, no cylinder I could pick that would bring me peace, because the invitation was never mine to decline. And now, I'm too deep to ever leave. I press my forehead to the steering wheel. My breath fogs the glass. Outside, the porch light clicks on, without me touching the switch. A step on the porch, heavy, measured, approaching. I close my eyes, and I wait. I don't know how long I sat there, pressed against the steering wheel, waiting for whatever was outside the door to come in. I listened to my own breathing, shallow and ragged, the only sound in the night. Then the porch light blinked off. 1 second, 2 seconds, just enough for me to think it was gone. I opened my eyes and saw nothing through the windshield but darkness. My hands unclenched from the wheel, and I slid to the edge of the seat, feet hitting the floor mat. I forced myself to stand, knees cracking under weight I didn't remember carrying. The front door stood closed, its surface unbroken except for the warped grain of wood I thought I recognized. I leaned forward, my reflection in the icy glass, a man, broken, undone by shadows he chased. Behind me, on the seat, lay the badge, chain, and key, my unwanted talismans. I picked them up with shaking fingers and held them out in front, like offerings. The metal felt warm, alive even. I turned away from the door, following the trail of muddy footprints I left the night I drove away from the field. They led across the porch, down the steps, and into the black. I stepped off the porch without thinking, barefoot, leaving the door wide. The grass was wet, soaking through my sweatpants, stinging against my ankles. I followed the footprints into the yard, past the old oak we planted when my daughter was born. Under that tree, where the ground was soft, I saw something I didn't expect. A single white sneaker, clean, new-looking, half buried in the damp earth. My flashlight showed it gleaming under the oak's twisted branches. I knelt beside it, heart lurching. It was the same sneaker I'd seen in the sedan that night, untarnished but out of place, as though someone reset it after I left. I pressed my palm over the toe and felt warm flesh beneath. My vision swam. I flashed the beam under the shoe and recoiled. A foot, perfectly preserved, still wearing the white sneaker. No blood, no tissue damage, just skin taut over bone, no sign of decay. I recognized the sock's brand, the same pair found in the car. My breath hitched as I dropped to my knees, stomach twisting. I curled back, pressing my mouth into my arm to stifle a sob. The world spun. I tasted copper. The badge's number burned on my tongue. A child's laughter rang out, distant but clear, weaving through tree limbs like a lost melody. I froze. The sneakers twitched under my hand. The foot began to twitch, flexing invisibly. I scrambled back, heart pounding, and the foot slid deeper into the ground, vanishing below the soil's surface. The oak's roots shifted, creaking, as though something large stirred beneath. My flashlight flickered and died. I fumbled for my phone, screen bright against the dark. I tapped the flashlight icon and the LED flicked on, shining over the yard. The sneaker was gone. The ground was undisturbed except for my footprints. I stood, backing toward the porch. My reflection in the window looked gaunt, eyes sunken. I pressed my forehead to the glass and whispered, "What do you want from me?" No answer. Only the whisper of wind through leaves, carrying a promise of rain. I reached for the badge and key, but a weight stopped me. The memory of the child's face in that photo. Eyes hollow, a boy's grin twisted by some sorrow. I pressed my palm against my chest. My shirt was damp with sweat. I realized my shirt was the same one I wore that night, stained where I held the badge. The stain was spreading as though bleeding. Something moved behind me. A soft shuffle, like footsteps on gravel. I turned slowly, phone light quivering. On the driveway sat that white pickup, headlights off. But the door was open, and inside the bed lay the body of a man in a black leather jacket, face hidden in shadows. He slumped forward, one arm hanging out, pale fingers brushing the tailgate. I recognized the build. Tall, lean, shoulders slumped like a man surrendering. My heart seized. I took a step back, my foot caught on the porch step and I stumbled, phone clattering to the ground. I picked it up with trembling hands and aimed the light. The body was gone. The bed was empty. The gate at the yard's edge swung in the soft wind, squeaking on its hinges. I walked toward it, compelled, each step a confession. The gate led to the road, and beyond the faint glow of street lamps illuminated the highway. I crossed the yard and passed under the oak, half expecting branches to reach for me, but they stayed still. The lawn's grass rippled like water. I reached the gate and paused, chain and key heavy in my pocket. I looked back at my house. The porch light had turned back on, and the door was closed. I felt a pull, an invitation, or perhaps a summons. The highway stretched out, the blacktop promising escape. But the wheat fields beside it turned away, shadows pooling like ink. I raised my eyes to the sky, expecting stars, but saw only a heavy cloud cover darker than midnight. Rising wind stirred the fence, rattling the metal links. I realized then that no matter where I went, I'd carry this with me. The badge, the key, the invitation I never wanted. I stepped onto the road without fear or hesitation. The air was sharp, a promise of rain. My shoes met the gravel cold, edges biting. I began to walk, footprints marking my path. A solitary figure in the hush of dawn's edge. Behind me, the gate swung shut on its own, the latch clicking into place. I didn't look back. With every step I took, I felt lighter and heavier all at once, as though shedding a weight while carrying it in my heart. The horizon glimmered. First pale gray, then washed in bruised lavender. The road narrowed to a line that disappeared beneath the sky. I held the badge in my hand, chain coiled around my fingers, the key's teeth glinting. I pressed the badge to my lips in a last, silent act of surrender. And then I heard it again, faint but unmistakable. The echo of a child's laughter drifting across the fields, pulling me forward. The asphalt beneath my feet was cold and fractured, each step echoing in the hush of early morning. I kept walking toward the dim glow on the horizon, bruised lavender bleeding into pale gray, as though reaching for some silent promise. My uniform jacket had been discarded somewhere back on the porch, but my shirt still bore the stain of oil and sweat, the badge and chain thumping against my thigh with every stride. I held the skeleton key loosely in my hand, its teeth catching the first pink of dawn. I passed the spot where the white sneaker had sat beneath the oak, now only a smooth circle of disturbed earth. The fence at the field's edge lay bare, wires slack, no sign of the gate's hinge or latch. The grain elevator was gone, vanished as completely as the figure in the barn had been. I clutched the key and badge, half expecting them to dissolve in my grasp, but they remained solid, real. Clues or curses, I still couldn't tell. My throat was raw, every breath a rasp of regret and unanswered questions. I felt hollow, as though someone had carved my chest open and stuffed it with whispering shadows. In the distance, a cop car crested the hill, high beams raised like searching eyes. I lifted my hands, badge in one, key in the other, and stepped into view. The car slowed, then stopped 50 feet away. The uniformed driver slid out, squinting at me in the dawn. "Sergeant Ellison," I said, voice cracking. He didn't approach, he just watched, expression unreadable. "Johnson," he murmured, "where have you been?" His voice was soft, but it carried the weight of every rule I'd broken. I drew in a breath. Chasing something that doesn't want to be caught. I held up the badge. I found this, and this. I jangled the key, and parts of a life that don't belong to me. My words spilled out, raw. I've trespassed, I've stolen evidence, My voice snagged. I swallowed. I've been chasing ghosts. His gaze flicked to the empty horizon, then back to me. "This isn't your case," he said, but his eyes betrayed both concern and doubt. "It's beyond us." I nodded, though it stung. "I know." I lowered my head. "But I can't stop." Ellison sighed and reached into my coat. He took the badge and key gently, as though they might shatter. He touched the chain and frowned. "Where did you get these?" He tucked them into his own pocket. "They're gonna lock me away for this." I clenched my fists at my sides. "Then lock me up," I said. "At least I'll be safe." He paused, then shook his head. "Number, you need to let go." I took a step forward. What if letting go is what they want? I spat the words out. What if I walk away and they come after someone else? He opened his mouth to answer, but a distant rumble cut him off. An engine, powerful and unfamiliar, mounting the asphalt. We both turned. A black SUV coasted over the hill, headlights sweeping the fields. It slowed behind us. Dust trailed in its wake. The engine idled, a low growl. The tinted windows framed nothing but shadows. I tensed. Ellison stepped back, hand on his holster. The passenger door opened. No one stepped out. The engine stilled. We waited. Seconds stretched like taut wire. Then the door clicked shut and the SUV rolled forward, stopping beside our cruiser. The driver's side window slid down with a hiss. A face peered out. Pale, worn, eyes too old for the wrinkles that marked his forehead. He looked like Frank Olson's photograph, the drifter from Kansas, but older, twisted by time I couldn't place. He tilted his head, examining us. "You came?" he said, voice gruff but strangely calm. My heart lurched. Ellison's eyes widened. He glanced at me, then back to the stranger. "How do you know his name?" Ellison demanded. But the man just shrugged, as though knowing names was as easy as breathing. "I know a lot of things." I swallowed hard and swallowed again. "Who are you?" The man leaned forward, sunlight catching the metal of a badge pinned to his chest, an antique sheriff's star. The number melted nearly beyond recognition, exactly like the one I'd held. "I'm the last one," he said, "and now you are next." I stepped back, jaw clenched. "Last one?" The SUV's engine revved, then died again. The man's lips curved into a sad, almost apologetic smile. "The last of the line," he said. Somewhere along the way, someone decided our story needed an audience. They leave breadcrumbs for the curious. They collect the lost, stitch them into their tapestry. His gaze drifted over the badge I no longer held. "You found my pieces." He gestured at Ellison and his sanity. Ellison looked stunned. "Enough," he said, voice trembling. "You can't just—" The man shook his head. "It's too late for enough." He sank back into the SUV. The door clicked. The engine coughed to life. Headlights flickered once on high, then off. The vehicle rolled back over the hill, dust rising like a curtain. Ellison and I watched it go, silence settling like a shroud. I turned to him. "What just happened?" He blinked, chest heaving. I don't know." He unpocketed the badge, the chain, the key. He handed them back to me. "Keep them," he said. "They'll stay with you if they want you to see the next piece." I stared at the objects in my hands. The metal felt heavier than ever. The key's teeth were sharper. The chain's link glinted. Bits of oil still clung to the badge's back. I slipped them into my pocket, fingers closing around them protectively. Ellison pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 22. I'm going off record." His eyes met mine, burdened by years of protocol he was about to sever. "I'm going silent. If you don't hear from me in 24 hours, start looking at County Road 17. He clicked off the mic. "I'm coming with you." He thrust his own jacket toward me. "I'm in this too." I nodded, stunned by relief and dread. "Okay." He gestured toward the road. "Where do we go first?" I closed my eyes, remembering the oak, the porch, the field, the silo's hidden catwalk, the photos pinned to its wall. "We go back," I said, "to the oak." We turned and walked down the highway toward the rising sun. My shadow stretched long behind me. Ellison's fell beside mine. I pressed the skeleton key in my coat pocket, feeling its weight like a heartbeat. My mind reeled with questions. What line was he talking about? Who stitched our pieces into his tapestry? How many breadcrumbs were left? And why had the stranger said I was next? We left the road where the oaks stood sentinel and stepped into the wet grass. Under the lowest branch, the dirt was smooth again, but a single footprint pressed deep like a demand. Follow me. I set my boot beside it, imprinting my presence beside the unknown. Ellison shone his light on the oak's trunk. Faint, carved into the bark, I saw initials. F.O. Digits scratched below, decades old. I traced them with my thumb. A breeze sighed through the leaves. The oak's branches swayed, creaking like an invitation and a warning. I drew in a breath and whispered to the wind, "I'm here." And I realized that the road ahead had no end, only questions waiting to be answered. I remember every detail of that night's drive, even now when I'm 3 coffees deep and half listening to the hum of the precinct's fluorescent lights. It was March, but the air still tasted of winter, sharp and metallic. The call came through just past midnight. Unit 12 Delta, possible runaway at Cedar Ridge Road. Check on a teenage girl, no weapons reported, but neighbors heard screaming. I was alone in the cruiser. My partner was off shift, and they'd patched me through on a courtesy. I eased onto the back roads, headlights cutting through a spray of mist that settled over the pines like a curtain. Cedar Ridge is one of those forgotten stretches. Houses set a half-mile apart, half lit by a single porch lamp that flickers off and on, as if someone inside is indecisively keeping vigil. The gravel crunch under my tires was loud. I remember thinking how absurd it was that a scream could carry that far in the stillness. The radio static was softer than usual, almost like it, too, was listening in. By the time I reached the Turner place, an aging farmhouse with faded red siding, I'd slowed to a crawl. The lawn was littered with fallen branches, the crooked mailbox barely hanging from its post. No sign of life. I killed the engine and sat for a moment, listening. The rain had started again, soft at first, but growing in confidence. It drummed on the roof of the cruiser. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out. The smell of wet pine needles hit me, and I noted how it made my throat tighten, like breathing dust instead of air. The walk to the porch took 5 long strides. I was drenched by the time I reached the steps. My boots squelched on the wet wood. I knocked once, then twice. Rain dripped from the brim of my jacket hood, pitter-pattering onto the front stoop. Up close, the house was worse than it looked from the road. The siding was warped, nails popping loose. A naked bulb above the door flickered in a slow, irregular rhythm. It was almost the only sound besides the rain and my own heartbeat, pounding against my ribs like it wanted out. "Turner residence, Deputy Collins," I said, voice flat and steady. "Heard some shouting. Everything all right in here?" Silence. I waited. No movement behind the door. I tried the handle. It swung open easily, as if someone was expecting me. The living room was murky, lit only by that flickering bulb outside the door, casting long, jittering shadows across the hardwood floor. I took a step in. The smell of damp fabric hit me. Wet clothes, or maybe someone had thrown a blanket over an old chair and forgotten it there. I swept my beam across the room, threadbare couch, a coffee table strewn with empty cans, walls decorated by peeling wallpaper patterned with roses that had long since lost their color. "Mrs. Turner? Mr. Turner?" I called, moving forward. The floorboards groaned under my weight. A tired scrape echoed from the stairs. I froze, heart jumping. A figure shifted at the top of the staircase. A girl, maybe 16, hair plastered to her face by rain or tears. I couldn't tell which. She stood so still I wondered if she was real. Her skin looked almost translucent in the flashlight's glare. She blinked once, then disappeared inside the dark hallway. "Deputy Collins?" I said softly, taking 2 steps toward the stairs. The girl reappeared at the bottom, face down, hands braced on the first step, as if she'd collapsed mid-descent. She didn't look at me, just stared at the threadbare carpet. "Are you okay?" I knelt, training my light on her. "Can I help you?" She didn't answer. The hush in the house felt like it was smothering me. I glanced up the stairs. Darkness loomed. I stood, motioning my flashlight upward. My radio crackled to life. 12 Delta, respond please. Static, then dead air. My stomach rolled. I took a cautious step toward the staircase. "Miss, can you tell me where your parents are?" My voice sounded too loud. I wished Reyes was with me. He'd have offered some sarcastic quip to break the tension. Here, none of that felt appropriate. She finally lifted her head. Her eyes were glistening pools of confusion and fear. She opened her mouth, but only a faint rasp came out. I leaned closer. "What's your name?" She swallowed, closed her eyes for a moment, then whispered, "He said I was alone." The words trembled. "He said I'd be safe if I stayed here." A floorboard creaked behind me. I swung around. Nothing but the dead coffee table and the long hallway leading to the kitchen. I caught movement out of the corner of my eye, a shadow flitting across the far wall, so fast I wasn't sure it happened. Then the girl was standing beside me, too close. I dropped my flashlight beam. It rolled and came to rest on the stairs, painting the wall with a harsh white circle. She stood silent, shoulders hunched, chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. She looked exactly like someone you'd want to help, vulnerable and small. But her eyes, they were empty, trapped in somewhere beyond this room. Upstairs, something thumped. I instinctively reached for my radio. "Dispatch, do you copy?" "I need nothing." I tapped the mic again. Silence. I pressed my palm against the wall, leaning into the house's damp chill as thunder rumbled outside. "Miss, did you hear that?" I asked. Rain pattered against the window glass, 1,000 little taps. She didn't respond. I scanned the walls. Family photos hung crooked, faces smiling under a layer of dust. Through the open kitchen door, I saw something glint on the linoleum floor. I crouched and picked up a single silver earring. A small hoop, bent slightly, as if ripped from someone's ear. My heart thudded. I pocketed the earring and stood. The girl was gone. "No," I said under my breath. The hush welcomed me, pressing in like a weight. I turned toward the hallway, boots squishing. My torchlight flickered as if protesting. I flicked it on and off, but it stayed dim. I needed full power. I twisted the bezel. Something clicked, then it flared. I swept it toward the staircase. The girl was halfway up, inching along on her hands and knees, humming. The sound was soft, monotone, like a lullaby gone wrong. Her back was to me. She moved slowly, deliberately. I felt bile rise in my throat. "Hey!" I shouted, but my voice cracked. She paused, head tilting as if listening. Then she continued humming, pulling herself forward. I grabbed the railing and climbed after her. Upstairs was colder, every breath visible. The air smelled of mildew and old secrets. The carpet underfoot was threadbare, pale gray, worn down to the padding in places. I followed the humming to the end of the landing, to a door sealed with old masking tape. Edges peeling, the wood swollen by moisture. The humming stopped. I reached out and tore the tape away. The door swung open, revealing a narrow closet filled with coats. No floor, just a tangle of shadows. I shone my beam into the darkness. A pair of eyes caught the light, tiny, reflective. A cat, number. Too many of them clustered together. The girl peered in, expression unreadable. Then she looked back at me and smiled. My chest seized. Her smile was slow, deliberate, without joy. I stumbled back, tripping over a loose floorboard. My knee hit the wood hard. I bit down a curse. When I looked up, she was gone again. I struggled to my feet and turned the flashlight in wide arcs. The entire upstairs hallway was empty. No girl, no one. Just the muted glow of the bulb at the end of the hall, and that oppressive hush. Somewhere behind me, the closet door creaked. I spun, light catching nothing but empty coat hooks swaying gently. There was no wind. I held my breath. The coat hooks stilled. I realized I was alone. My radio was silent, my flashlight the only voice I had. I faced the staircase and swallowed hard. The hairs on my neck prickled. Then, from deep within the house, I heard a soft giggle, childish, innocent sounding, but edged with something brittle like broken glass. I froze, every thought slipping away except one. I was in over my head, and I had no idea what was waiting downstairs. I gripped the banister and forced myself to swallow. The giggle had come from below, somewhere in the bowels of that house. My flashlight trembled in my grip, casting the walls in jittery light. A second, softer giggle drifted up, like a child playing hide-and-seek in an empty room. My heart pounded until it felt lodged in my throat. I took the first step down, boots scraping the worn treads. The girl's humming had stopped entirely. In that silence, the house seemed to settle around me. Every creak and pop became its own warning. I reached the bottom, each step echoing against the walls, and swept my flashlight across the living room. The sofa was empty, the coffee table still strewn with cans. The peeling wallpaper looked more menacing in that harsh beam, petals dark and curled at the edges. I called her name, voice low. "Sarah? Are you here?" Nothing but the rain on the roof, and my own ragged breathing answered back. I circled the coffee table, careful not to disturb any potential evidence. My eyes settled on the earring I'd pocketed upstairs. Its silver surface flashed in the beam every time I turned. I considered dropping it back, but that felt wrong. It might be the only proof of what happened here. At the front of the living room, a doorway led to the kitchen. I inched forward. The kitchen was dim, lit only by a cracked window where pale moonlight seeped in. I saw footprints on the linoleum, wet prints leading from the back door toward the stove, then turning left into a narrow hallway. Whoever had walked through had stepped in something damp, perhaps the muddy yard outside. I crouched and traced one print with gloved fingers. It was too small to be a man's boot, child-sized. My throat tightened. I rose and followed the trail into the hallway that led toward what had to be the girls' room. The walls here were bare, except for a single old photograph of a family, their faces faded. A mother, father, and a little girl whose eyes seemed to follow me. Someone had framed it carefully. The glass was unbroken, but the picture had water stains that blurred the father's face. My radio crackled to life with static, then fell silent. I patted the unit, frustration rising. "Dispatch, this is Collins, please advise." Silence. I cursed under my breath and forced myself to focus. The hallway ended at two closed doors. The left door was unremarkable. I pressed an ear to it and heard nothing. The right door was slightly ajar. Light spilled out onto the floor. I pushed it open. The room was small and sparse. A twin bed with a frayed blanket. A dresser with drawers pulled halfway out. The moonlight bathed the walls in a sickly glow. The smell hit me first. Something like spoiled milk and old sweat. Footprints continued across the bedroom floor, heading toward a back door. I shone my light upward. The ceiling fan was still, blades coated in dust, but one blade had a streak of something dark, rust, or something else. I swallowed and stepped toward the door. The footprints led outside onto a small wooden deck. I nudged the door open, and the rain slapped into the room in a wet rush. I stepped out and saw a fenced backyard overgrown with weeds and brambles. Moonlight revealed a disused swing set, its seats swaying slightly in the breeze. I froze. On one of the swings sat the girl, legs dangling, humming softly again. Her back was to me, head bowed, hands clasped in her lap. The swing chain squeaked in time with her humming rhythm. "Sarah!" My voice cracked. I called again, louder this time. The humming stopped. She lifted her head, exposing eyes that gleamed in the moonlight, huge, empty pools. She smiled, slow and unnatural, then pushed off the ground, swinging higher, the chains creaking in protest under her weight. I stepped onto the deck. Every nerve in my body screamed to retreat, but duty and dread propelled me forward. The grass was wet and clung to my boots as I crossed. I stopped under the swing set. She stared at me, posture relaxed, humming a new lullaby that sounded eerily familiar, like the same tune my mother used to hum when I was 8, something I'd repressed long ago. "Sarah, you can't stay out here alone," I said, voice steady despite the storm inside. My flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the swing set and the tangled weeds. She cocked her head like a curious animal. Then she hopped off the swing and landed silently, feet bare. She walked toward me, arms at her sides, humming low. Each step was measured, deliberate, and the dripping rain made her hair cling to her face. When she was 3 paces away, she stopped. The ground was soaked. I could see mud caked between her toes. I shone the light up her legs. Her jeans were torn, wet through, and there was a dark smear on the left knee. I swept the beam up. Her shirt was stained across the chest, but it was hard to tell what it was. Tears? Blood? Rainwater? My stomach churned. "Sarah, we need to get you inside," I said. She didn't reply. She just stood there, head tilted, and the humming continued. It felt like the house was breathing around us. Relief, then tension, then relief again, in a cycle I couldn't break. A flash of lightning illuminated the yard, and I glimpsed the fence beyond the swing set. The boards were splintered, one plank missing entirely, giving onto a field of knee-high grass. I followed her gaze and realized she could have walked away into those fields at any moment. No footprints led outward, though. Instead, they all led here, to the swing set, over and over, back and forth. "Can you tell me what happened here?" I asked softly. She closed her eyes and the humming tapered off into silence. I waited. The rain pattered. The world held its breath. After a long moment, she opened her eyes. Her gaze was fixed somewhere behind me. I turned, but saw only the yard and the dark fields beyond. When I looked back, she was gone again. I spun in place, flashlight beam searching. The swing set stood empty, wet chains swaying. Mud, slick footprints led back toward the house, toward the back door. I followed, heart in my throat, every footstep ringing in the quiet like a gunshot. The wind picked up, rattling the storm door. Inside the kitchen, the front door slammed. I dove toward the hallway, beam shaking, stomach twisting. The lights flickered once, then stayed dark. I heard footsteps, light, barely audible on the tile. I pointed my flashlight toward the sound. The little dresser drawer was sliding closed all by itself. It creaked shut, and then the room was still. I raised my voice. Sarah, this isn't funny." No answer. I circled the table and saw a single boot print on the linoleum, as if someone had stood there, looked out the window, then left. The print was child-sized, same as before, but there was only one. My breaths came in shallow bursts. I wanted to radio for backup, wanted someone else here with me. But the radio was dead. It wouldn't even click when I pressed the button. My flashlight was the only thing cutting through this darkness. I needed to find her, or him. I backed out into the hallway. The humming started again, low and distant, but louder than before. I followed it toward the stairs. As I climbed, each step was heavier than the last. I reached the landing and saw the closet door wide open. Moonlight from the window spun a patch of pale light on the carpet. The humming was just beyond. I stepped inside the closet, not where coats hung, but into a narrow crawl space behind it. The walls were paneled in old pine, rough and splintered. I shone the light deeper. Something moved. A pair of eyes reflected back again, but these were smaller. A child's? The humming was deafening now. It vibrated against my ribcage. A wet hand shot out of the darkness and grabbed my wrist. It yanked me forward, and I stumbled, flashlight falling, beam bouncing wildly. I heard a soft gasp, a gurgle of breath. I crouched, scooped up the light and pointed it into the void. No boot prints, no bodies. Just an empty crawl space lined with wooden slats, damp and root-bound. My wrist was wet, my glove soaked through. I pulled free, heart hammering, and as I did, I saw on the wall in smudged, muddy handprints a single word: stay. My world narrowed to that command, carved in rain mud and fear. Behind me, the closet door slammed shut. I yanked it open again, empty hallway. The humming cut off with a snap. Everything went quiet. The rain, the wind, the house itself. In that silence, I realized I was completely alone. And if that word meant anything, staying was not optional. I took a breath, glanced back at the crawl space, then turned and ran down the hall, toward the living room, toward the front door. But when I reached the living room, the door was gone. I stood there, chest tight, and realized that whatever I'd found in that crawl space had already been inside the house with me. And now it was waiting. The living room swallowed me whole. The air felt thick, like trying to breathe through fog. I stumbled sideways when I realized the windows were gone. Only blank walls where glass used to be. My flashlight beam swung wildly as I spun in circles, trying to find the door. Instead, I saw the couch, upended, springs exposed and ripping through the upholstery. The coffee table lay shattered, its legs snapped off. I hadn't done this. I would have remembered. My pulse thundered, and I pressed my palm against the wall, feeling its cold, damp surface, like the house itself was bleeding moisture. My radio crackled with static again, the faintest voice buried beneath white noise. Collins, respond. I punched the mic until my knuckles ached. Nothing. I was cut off, truly alone. My flashlight flickered with each heartbeat. I lifted it and saw something glint in the corner of my eye. A single bare boot standing upright on the torn carpet, pointing toward where the hallway should be. I followed its angle, squinting. There was a faint outline of a corridor beyond what used to be the front door. I swallowed against the lump in my throat and said aloud, "All right, you want me to stay? Fine. I'll stay." The word stay echoed in my mind, muddy and insistent. I took a step forward. My boot squelched as it sank into a pool of water on the floor. Rainwater? I didn't know. The ceiling above dripped intermittently, forming puddles I avoided like landmines. I edged toward the corridor, flashlight trained on the boot. It wasn't moving. But then a child's giggle answered me from behind. Soft, playful, mocking. I spun, and for one breathless moment I saw the girl climbing out of the couch cushions, her small body twisting like a marionette. Her hair was plastered to her face, her clothes torn, and her eyes, those hollow eyes, were fixed on me. Then she disappeared as quickly as she emerged, and I stumbled backward into the wall, cursing under my breath. Somewhere deeper in the house, a door slammed shut. The crash reverberated like a gunshot. I blinked and realized the hallway before me wasn't the one I remembered. Instead of leading to the kitchen, it diverted left into a narrow passage. I forced myself to follow it, each step echoing. By the third corner, I could taste salt on the stale air. The passage opened into a room I'd never seen. A makeshift nursery, walls painted a faded pink, and a cradle rocked slowly on its own. A stuffed teddy bear lay on the floor, wet fur matted and its button eye missing. The rocking stopped as I approached. I hesitated, then knelt and picked up the bear. The missing eye revealed only stuffing behind the empty socket. I heard a soft scraping behind me. I whipped around. Footprints led from the cradle to a closed door opposite the entrance. They were too small for an adult and too shallow as if she'd been carried at some points. I set the bear on the floor and approached the door. The doorknob was warm. I hesitated, feeling the weight of every second I'd spent here. The house watched. I pushed the door open and entered the next room. It was dark except for a sliver of light under the far wall. I shone my flashlight across it and saw a row of photographs taped to the wall, all of them the same. The girl, standing in various places around the house, on the porch, in the backyard, in the crawlspace, her face expressionless, eyes staring directly into the lens. The date scrawled on each negative. Tonight's date. Each photograph time-stamped mere minutes apart, even though I'd been here longer. My stomach turned. I stepped closer and heard behind me a gentle humming, the same lullaby she'd sung on the swing. It felt like a magnet, pulling me toward the light spilling from under the next door. I crossed the room and opened that door into utter darkness. My flashlight revealed only a narrow stairwell spiraling down. The walls were damp stone, slick with moss. The humming was louder now, louder than anything I'd heard. It wasn't melodic. It was an insistence, a call compelling me deeper. I considered turning back. Every instinct screamed to flee. But duty pushed me onward. I descended the stairs, boots slipping on the mossy steps. At the bottom, I landed in a stone cellar. The air here was cold enough to freeze breath into mist. My beam swept across rows of metal shelving, jars of murky liquid, tools I couldn't recognize. Chains hung from the ceiling, their ends frayed. In the center of the room lay a patch of dry floor, a circle where no moss grew. At its edge, scratched into the stone, was the word I'd heard so many times. Stay. I swallowed, throat dry. The humming stopped, and the cellar fell silent. Then a whisper. Go. I spun, heart in my throat, flash catching nothing but empty shelves. Go? I repeated, voice cracking. The whisper came again, closer, a breath at my ear. Go. I realized I'd misheard. It wasn't telling me to stay, it was telling me to go, to leave, to escape this place. Adrenaline surged. I bolted up the stairs, shards of moss tearing at my hands. I burst through the door and ran back through the nursery, ignoring the photographs, ignoring the cradle. I tore down the hallway and skidded into the living room. The front door was visible now, luminous, open and beckoning. I sprinted toward it, but the floor gave way beneath me. I plunged through what felt like a thin layer of wood into the darkness below. My flashlight flew from my hand, skittering away. Pain shot through my ankle. I lay still, listening to the house groan around me. My radio lay in my pocket, silent and useless. I closed my eyes, breathing hard. In the darkness, I felt the press of something warm against my cheek, a small hand, weak but deliberate. I froze. Then a soft voice, so close it felt like it was inside my skull. "Don't go." I felt tears sting my eyes. My rational mind screamed to rise, to escape, but the voice wrapped around my sanity like chains. I opened my mouth to protest, but all that came out was a whisper. "I can't stay." A single sob escaped me. Then the weight on my face lifted. I opened my eyes. The cellar was empty again, but the circle on the floor glowed faintly, an impossible, pulsing amber light that made my eyes ache to look at it. I struggled to my feet, favoring my twisted ankle. The cellar door was gone, replaced by a solid wall of stone. There was no way out. I realized I was trapped, not by locks or doors, but by something older, something patient. The last thing I saw before the amber light burned out was the single photograph pinned to the wall behind where the door had been. My face, drenched in sweat, eyes wide with terror, standing outside that swing set, the date and time printed below, June 3rd, 3:14 a.m. And it wasn't tomorrow's date. It was 3 minutes from now. I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat as I sank to the damp stone floor. Every breath weighted with fear and disbelief. My ankle throbbed fiercely, but I forced myself upright. The amber light had flickered out, leaving me in almost pitch darkness, save for the weak glow of my failing flashlight. I clicked it on and off, but the beam was sputtering, dying. I shoved it into my jacket pocket and drew my service weapon, finger trembling on the trigger guard. The cellar was silent now. Too silent. The jars on the metal shelves rattled faintly, as if stirred by a breeze I could not hear. I moved forward, each step careful, footfalls echoing hollowly. The circle on the floor stared back at me, its carved letters jagged and cruel in the beam of my pocket light. Stay. It felt like a command etched into my skin, but it wasn't my voice telling me to stay anymore. I still heard that whisper behind my ear, "Don't go." And I knew that if I hesitated, something in the darkness would seize me. I pressed my back against the cold stone wall and slid down until I sat, knees against my chest. The groan of the house around me sounded like breathing, slow, deliberate, alive. My radio lay next to me, silent, useless. I thought about calling for backup, but I couldn't risk that walkthrough again. And even if I did, they'd find nothing. It was the first rule of Cedar Ridge. No one else ever saw what I saw. No records would reflect electrical failures or missing doors. If anyone came here, they'd think I'd cracked under the strain. Drawing a breath, I opened my jacket and extracted the earring I'd found. The silver hoop was still bent. I ran my thumb across its cool edge. It felt like the only proof of what had happened. Proof that I hadn't imagined the girl, the photographs, the crawl space. I slipped it into my pocket and rose, bracing my weight on the gun. Pain screamed from my ankle, but adrenaline smothered it. I tested the walls for seams or cracks. Each inch of stone felt solid, impenetrable. The only exit had been swallowed by rock. Above me was a wooden trapdoor, but it hung flush with the ceiling. No handle, no hinges visible. I traced the outline with my fingers. It was sealed tight. A cough echoed somewhere behind the shelves. My head snapped in that direction. The beam caught the edge of a jar and glinted off its glass. I raised my gun and moved toward the sound, boots slipping on the slick floor. I rounded the shelves. Nothing but glass vessels brimming with cloudy liquid. A foul odor rose from one, like algae mixed with rust. I forced myself to keep going until the beam fell on a small hatch built into the wall. The hatch was no larger than a floor grate. Its frame was metal, rusted. I knelt down and tried to pry it open with my shoe. The metal resisted. Then I heard a scrape behind me, low and dragging. I whirled around. My light caught the edge of a rag doll's face, half buried in the moss. A single glass eye staring up. The other eye was missing, same as the bear's. Its sewn smile was stained with something dark. I swallowed hard and tore my gaze away. The scrape came again, louder, like shoes on stone. But no footprints led up here. I creeped back to the hatch, heart hammering. I pried with my heel again. Iron gave a little. With a grunt, I pressed my shoulder into it, and it swung inward on creaking hinges. Beyond was a narrow tunnel carved crudely into the earth, walls lined with roots and mud. Water dripped from overhead, forming muddy puddles underfoot. My flashlight beam traced its length, maybe 15 feet until it curved out of sight. It smelled of earth and decay. A line of muddy footprints led in, but not out. I flicked off the light and listened. Silence. Then, from the tunnel, a soft sob, barely audible, like a child crying herself to sleep. My throat constricted. I clicked the flashlight back on and trained the beam into the tunnel. The footprints stopped halfway down, and in the puddle at the edge I saw a small handprint, pressed as if someone had leaned heavily there. Something coaxed me forward. A need to find her, to end this. With each step, the tunnel groaned softly, like a living thing. I heard the sob again, closer. My light caught movement. At the far end, a small silhouette, bent over, shoulders shaking. Relief and dread collided. I rushed forward. "Sarah!" I called, voice echoing. My bullet casings rattled in my pocket as I tucked my weapon away, mind sharpening on rescue. The silhouette straightened, and I realized with a hollow twist that it was not Sarah. It was a suit, a sheriff's uniform hanging limply, headless. Its collar was stained dark. Beneath it lay a metal badge, the number scratched off. I knelt and picked it up. It felt warm, despite the cold tunnel. When I turned it over, the photo beneath was my face, crisp and clear. I staggered back as a child's whisper slithered up the tunnel behind me. "Stay." My flashlight flickered, beam jerking. The sobbing had stopped. The tunnel was empty of footprints now, pristine, untouched. I scrambled to my feet, stomach twisting. I thrust the photo into my jacket and ran back toward the hatch, slipping on mud, tearing at the walls with bloody nails until I emerged into the vaulted cellar once more. Everything was dark. My light sputtered. I switched it off, plunged into pitch black. Only the dull glow of my malfunctioning pocket light remained. In the hush, the metallic scent of blood and earth filled my nostrils. My radio crackled again with static, then a clear voice. "Collins?" "Report." My name, plain and real. I hit the button. "Dispatch, this is Collins. I'm in the cellar at the Turner property. The line died. Static flared and then cut. I stood motionless, blood pounding in my ears. The only proof I had of the sheriff's badge and the photo in my pocket, shit, the earring too, felt like anchors weighed with guilt. Above me, I heard scratching at the trapdoor. I raised my weapon and pressed myself against the wall. The trapdoor rattled. A beam of light shone through the cracks. Faint, distant but unmistakable. My cruiser's headlight cutting through the mist outside. Dispatch had sent someone. Backup was here. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Relief flooded me. The trapdoor rattled again, louder. I clutched the earring, the badge, the photo. I called out, "Over here!" Silence answered. The headlight wavered. Then the trapdoor unseated and thunked open. My heart leapt. until I saw who crouched there. The girl, Sarah, smiled at me from the darkness above, her lips stained a dark red, eyes gleaming. She held two things in her fists, my radio, broken and warped, and the other deputy's badge, still shining despite the grime. She dropped them both into the cellar like stones in a well. Then she tilted her head, cocked an unseen ear, and called softly, "Stay." I aimed my weapon, fingers numb. I barely whispered, "I can't," and she laughed, a sound that echoed off the stone, long after the trapdoor slammed shut again. My hand shook so badly I could hardly keep my weapon trained on the spot where Sarah's face had grinned down at me through that trapdoor. I swallowed hard and pressed my back against the cold stone wall, every fiber of me screaming to run, to climb that ladder and never look back. But something held me there. Duty, stubbornness, or maybe the dread that if I left, nobody else would believe what weighted down here. I thought of the badge with my face in it, slick with tunnel mud, and I knew I had to see this through. I knelt and scooped up the items she'd dropped. My radio, its speaker grill crushed, the deputy's badge, twisted but intact, number still legible. I tucked them into my jacket pocket, pressing them against my chest like a shield. My ankle throbbed with every pulse of blood, but adrenaline dulled the pain enough to stand. I tested my weight on that leg and found I could move. I hefted my weapon and began toward the cellar door that no longer existed, only a smear of damp stones. The wall was unbroken, but within its darkness I sensed a faint outline, a rough cavern mouth carved into the stone. My boot struck a lump in the mortar, and I knelt to touch it. The stone crumbled under pressure, revealing a seam. With a grunt, I pressed harder, fingers scraping into that crack. The wall shifted, a panel sliding inward on hidden tracks I'd never noticed until that moment. My back slammed against the opposite wall as the opening widened, revealing a narrow shaft of pale lamplight above. I placed my palm on the rough stone edge and peered up. Beyond, the wooden planks of a low ceiling formed the base of the house's first floor. Through a small hatch high overhead, I could see a sliver of open floor, bare feet stepping over debris, Sarah's humming drifting, down like a cold breeze. I felt bile rise in my throat. Climbing out was just as perilous as descending had been, but it was the only way. I slung my weapon to one side and grabbed the lip of the opening. With a heave, I pulled myself upward, foot finding a ledge in the masonry, then another. My ankle screamed protest, but I ignored it, focusing on the hatch above. When I reached up, the wood was splintered and damp. My fingers found a crack to leverage, and I pushed. The hatch swung inward, and I rolled through onto familiar wood floor, landing hard on all fours. Gasping, I shoved myself upright. The basement passage had delivered me into what must have been the house's laundry room. Mismatched tiles under my boots, a rusted washer and dryer rattling softly, though they were long unplugged. I could see the kitchen beyond, lights flickering as though unwilling to fully ignite. I moved toward it, using the wall for support. Every breath tasted of dust and mold. Above me, I heard Sarah's soft footsteps padding across floorboards. In the kitchen, the back door stood open. Cold night air washed in, carrying the scent of pine and mud. Moonlight revealed the yard beyond, overgrown grass glistening with dew. The swing, set where she'd waited earlier, now twisted at a bizarre angle. One seat dragging in the grass as though it had been swung with force. I approached the door, hand on my holster, thinking I'd finally have her cornered. But the yard was empty, no Sarah, no footprints, only her humming, echoing low, like a wind through hollow trees. It taunted me. I stepped outside, mud sucking at my boots. The swing seat scraped against the grass in a slow creak. I advanced toward it, scanning the tree line. My flashlight pierced the darkness but found nothing. Behind me, the back door slammed shut so hard I staggered forward. I whirled, weapon raised, breath caught in my chest. The door's window was gone, shards of glass scattered across the threshold. The inside of the house was dark now, no lights, no glow under the door. It might as well not have been there. My radio crackled once with static, then died forever. I shoved it back in my pocket. A wind kicked up, rustling the pines. I considered shouting her name, but the sound stuck in my throat. Instead, I took slow steps toward the far edge of the yard where the fields waited, their tall grasses swaying in the breeze. I had to get out of here, return to town, call in everything, get teams with cameras and lights to comb this place. Make it real for them, make them come see. But when I reached the fence where a plank was missing, I saw something that froze me cold. The planks were perfectly intact. No gap. The fence line was continuous, unbroken wood stretching left and right as far as I could see. One moment, I'd been near the boundary. The next, I was standing 50 feet from it. It was like the yard had stretched around me, an infinite labyrinth. Panic rose in my chest, fear and fury mixing. I ran toward the fence, slamming my shoulder against the wood. It rattled, but held. I kicked at it, punching with the heel of my boot, leaving a scuff. But still, it stayed firm. I sucked in a shaky breath, chest heaving. Behind me, the swing set creaked again. Its call my only company. I wheeled around. The grass behind me was trampled in a narrow corridor leading back toward the house. I followed it, dread like a companion at my heels. Back at the porch, the front door stood ajar, just as I'd left it. Except the porch light was blazing now, full brightness, no flicker. The gravel drive was empty, no cruiser in sight. In its place lay the broken remains of my flashlight, shards of plastic and glass gleaming coldly. I crouched and retrieved the casing, blackened and melted in places. My reflection in a shard showed my face streaked with mud and sweat. I shoved the pieces into my pocket, igniting a new resolve. If everything else here had been a trick, this piece of my identity was real enough to take back. I stood and opened the door. Inside, the house was a mirror of my mind, rooms shifting, walls sliding. The living room had returned to its original layout. Couch upright, coffee table in place, wallpaper intact. But the air was tinged with something familiar. The tick of a grandfather clock at the far end, though I'd never seen one in this house. The sound counted down the seconds. Tick, tock, tick, matching my pulse. I moved through the rooms, following the clock's call. Each doorway led to another, a maze of memory and fear. Finally, I reached the hallway where, earlier, I'd found the photograph of myself pinned to the wall with tonight's date 3 minutes in the future. I pressed my hand to the spot. I could still feel the nail holes. The photograph was gone. In its place was a fresh print, my boot, standing in a puddle of water, the badge and earring lying at its toe. My heart sank as I realized this was not about finding her. It was about being found. The clock struck again, and I saw words scratched into the wooden floorboards. Go. I stared at them as another footstep sounded behind me, light but insistent. I raised my weapon, turning slowly. The first beam of dawn's light touched the farthest window, revealing her, a silhouette framed in the glow. It was Sarah, stepping out of the shadows. She was perched on the windowsill, one hand on the frame, head cocked in that curious tilt she'd worn that first night. I called out to her, voice rough, "This ends now. Show yourself." She stepped inside, smooth as smoke, closing the door behind her. As she crossed the room, I saw her eyes glint in the half-light, holding every secret this place would never relinquish. She stopped 2 paces away, the clock ticking toward the next hour. The hush between ticks felt like an eternity. Her lips parted, but no humming came. Instead, she gestured to the badge and earring in my pocket. My jaw clenched as I reached in and laid them on the floor before me. She knelt and arranged them neatly side by side, like offerings. She stood then, straight-backed, and my voice came out in a whisper. "What do you want?" She stared at me, expression unreadable, and for the first time I saw something flicker in those hollow eyes, something like pity. Then she tilted her head slightly, the faintest motion, and the grandfather clock let out a final chime, once, solid and resonant. She took a step forward, placing her bare foot on the badge, crushing the metal with the ball of her foot. The earring clinked under her other foot, bending beneath the pressure. She met my gaze, and a single word, not a whisper but a sound felt deep in my bones, filled the room. "Stay?" She paused, breath suspended, her question hanging between us like a guillotine blade. I raised my weapon again, knuckles white, but my words caught in my throat. Outside, the final chime faded, and the hush returned, sealed, infinite. And I realized, with a clarity as cold as the dawn light filtering through those shifting windows, that I still hadn't found her. And she definitely hadn't found me. It was impossible to tell which fate was worse, what lurked in the darkness below, or the choice she offered me now. I lowered my weapon. The house exhaled, the walls pulsed, the floor groaned. Sarah's eyes narrowed, waiting. The question she asked would be my answer, but I didn't know how to speak it aloud. I stood there, the weight of every shredded whisper and broken plank pressing down on me. The badge's crushed metal bit into my palm, and the earring's twisted curve dug into my fingers like a reminder that this night would never end. Sarah hovered in the half-light, watching me with those endless eyes, as if she held the final piece of some puzzle I'd only just glimpsed. My ankle throbbed, each heartbeat a drum, trailing me back through every step I'd taken, through the nursery's empty cradle, the crawlspace's taunting darkness, the swing set's lonely creak. I felt the house shifting around us, walls sliding and twisting like memory's own breath. The grandfather clock's chime echoed at my back, soft now, but insistent, counting down a moment I could neither escape nor change. I swallowed the lump in my throat and opened my mouth to speak, but the words died there. Instead, I knelt and arranged the shattered remains of my authority, the badge and the earring, side by side on the warped floorboards. Sarah leaned forward and placed her tiny hand atop them. Her palm was cold, wet with dew or something older, something I couldn't name. The moment she touched them, the house sighed, a low, mournful sound that rattled the windows and sent dust motes dancing like ghosts in the air. She rose and backed away, her form blurring at the edges as if she belonged to 2 worlds at once, one I could almost touch, and one that hovered just beyond my grasp. She looked at me, head tilted in that cruelly curious way, and the clock chimed once more, then stopped. Silence flooded the room, thick as oil, pressing me into the earth through the soles of my boots. My radio lay in my pocket, lifeless, but I fished it out anyway. I pressed the button, listening for a voice, an anchor, anything to prove I wasn't alone in this nightmare. The static that came back wasn't mix from dispatch. It was layered, distorted, her humming, interlaced with a child's laughter. I recoiled and dropped the radio. It skittered across the floor, bouncing off a shattering pane of imaginary glass. Sarah took a step toward it, then paused over the handset. She raised it to her ear as though listening, then nodded once. as if she'd received the message. She placed the handset back on the floor, and it lay there, quiet but somehow still alive. I swallowed and tried to stand, but my legs gave way. Pain shot up my ankle, sharp as a blade. I steadied myself on the wall, pressing my palm against the cold stone. The world tilted, and the badge and earring slid across the floor toward me, rolling, clinking, until they stopped at my feet. I stared down, powerless, as though they had chosen me instead of the other way around. Sarah's face moved in close, too close, and I could see the faintest outline of tears tracking through the grime on her cheeks. Her voice, when it came, was softer than anything I'd heard. "You're almost home." I blinked. The windows at the far end of the room erupted with dawn's first light, stark and unyielding. I squinted against it, but when I blinked again, the windows were gone, replaced by the same walls I'd first encountered. The house had folded in on itself once more. She stepped back, straightened, and raised one hand, palm outward, in a gesture at once welcoming and warning. The radio's static hummed again, now clearly her voice emerging from the white noise, repeating a single word that echoed through every timber and stone. "Stay." Her question hung in the air, a razor's edge cutting between duty and survival, reality and oblivion, the world I'd sworn to protect, and the darkness that had claimed me. I lowered my gaze to the badge, then to Sarah, then to the radio lying at her feet. The dawn light, or whatever light this was, crept around the walls, illuminating the single corridor that now stretched behind her, impossibly long, bending the room into a hallway that vanished into black. And I realized, with a clarity that felt like falling, that I had just one choice to make, one I might never understand, one that would bind me to this place forever, or break me free for good. But even as I reached down, fingers trembling, I could not find the courage to speak it aloud. "Can I leave?" I pulled onto Oak Ridge Road at 003, the cruiser's engine ticking down under the weight of thick night air. Rain drummed lightly on the hood like an urgent, restless heartbeat. I killed the wipers and stepped out, boots sinking into soggy gravel. Everything smelled like wet asphalt and cold metal. No wind, just that low, constant patter of raindrops. My flashlight cut a path through the darkness, illuminating an old mailbox smashed sideways at house number 216. The red flag hung open, like a signal I'd been expected. I clicked the mic twice. No response, but static. Dispatch had already handed the call off. They were busy with the usual drunken disorderlies. Nothing for patrols but paperwork. I wanted my radio to speak back, to break the silence, but it stayed dead. So I squared my shoulders and eased the cruiser's door shut. Water ran in rivulets down my jacket sleeves as I approached the front door, which hung slightly ajar. The lock wasn't broken. It looked like a hand had pulled it back, stepped away, and left it. Inside, the hallway light flickered once and died. My beam caught a coat rack loaded with adult jackets and two little ones, bright pink and pale blue. Hanging side by side, straps slumped. The floor beneath them was sprinkled with muddy footprints. Not adult size. They were too small, and the deeper prints at the threshold suggested someone had backed out. I leaned in, heart thudding, watching the circle of dust where the larger prints should have been. Dirt-covered boots made no noise here. I moved forward, flashlight dancing across peeling wallpaper, through a dining room that felt frozen in time. The long table was set with mismatched china. 4 plates, 4 forks, forks tarnished with age. Chairs were pushed halfway under. No sign of food, no crumbs. A single candle stub stood in the middle. the wick black and charred, as if it had burned down whatever just enough to scare someone off. It was too neat to be staged, too ordinary to feel normal. The kitchen door at the far end was open. I checked my breathing. Slow, steady, grip on the flashlight tight. Inside, the sink was empty, the counters clear, except for a smear of something dark on the backsplash. I crouched to examine it. At first, I thought oil, but the smell was sharper, like dried blood, watered down by the rain. My stomach clenched. I flicked the beam upward and saw the smudge. Handprint, fingertips splayed. Recent, sticky looking. No other prints around. Someone had reached up and left a mark, then vanished. I called out, voice low. "This is Officer Reed. Anyone here, call out now." My words echoed back through silent walls, sounding hollow, rehearsed. I waited. Nothing stirred. Even the steady tapping of rain seemed to hush itself. I moved to the back door, found it unlocked too. Home security systems never lived this far out. Neighbors were half a mile apart. No cameras, no alarms. Just darkness. My flashlight caught a cluster of footprints leading into the yard. One set small, one set large, both padded softly into the grass. They trailed out toward the old barn, its window shutters swinging in the rain. I drew my sidearm, inches of barrel gleaming, and walked across slick grass that soaked through my boots. Gravel crunched underfoot, louder than I intended. I cursed under my breath and slowed. At the barn door, my light revealed a gap beneath its boards, a pale shape moving just out of sight. I tightened my grip, pressed my back against the damp wood, and called again, "Come on out. Let's talk." No response. Then I heard it. The softest click, like a latch unlocking. My heart seized. The door eased inward, and I caught a flicker of movement inside, too quick to see, but enough to know someone was there. I stepped through. The beam cut across farm tools leaning on walls, old animal cages stacked in a corner, and then stopped on the ground. A child's doll, face cracked, soaked through, lying on its back. One glass eye was missing. The other reflected my flashlight like a lone star. I swallowed, turned, and saw the silhouette of a little girl curled up in the corner. She didn't cry or scream. She wasn't shivering or scrambling away, just huddled, shoulders hunched, head down. I holstered my weapon slowly, knelt on the straw-strewn floor and said, "Hey there, sweetheart. You okay?" No answer. I eased my hand forward, palm up. She didn't move. I reached out and she looked up, eyes dark, wet, haunted beyond her years. She whispered, voice barely audible over the rain, "He'll come back." Then she stared past me, into the beam's edge like some other presence filled this place. A soft thud sounded overhead, like something falling. My gut tightened. I hadn't noticed the loft above. I stood, grabbed a wooden beam for balance, and shone my light upward. Steps, made from rough planks, led to a trapdoor. The sound came again. Heavy, calculated. I drew my baton and climbed. The trapdoor gave under my weight, creaking like a broken hinge. I pushed it open and entered the loft. It was small, just enough space for a mattress and a table. On the mattress lay old newspapers, faded and torn. Then a folded blanket next to a single, cracked coffee mug. On the table, a Polaroid photo. A man, a woman, a girl about 6, smiling in front of this very barn. Written in white marker on the border, Family Day, July 2003. My breath caught. This barn was old. Why remain? I pocketed the photo carefully and knelt by the blanket. Beneath it was a set of muddy footprints stamped into the wood, one adult, one child. They ended abruptly at the edge, then nothing, like someone vanished into the rafters. I felt a cold draft at my back, spun. Empty loft, empty barn, but the door at the bottom of the ladder was closed now, shut solidly, no reason. I hadn't heard it move. I tapped it. Empty hallway beyond. I climbed down, heart racing, and guided the girl toward the door. She followed without a word. Back in the corner, she looked up at me again, eyes glistening. He said if I waited, he'd come, she said. He forgot his coat. She pointed to the corner. I shined my light. A small coat lay on the ground, red hood, lined in fleece, too small for a child her size. I picked it up. No stains, no sign who wore it. I held it out. Is this his? She shook her head and scuffed at the straw. I handed it to her, and she lifted it, hugged it like a teddy bear, then dropped it. It landed face down. A dark stain soaked through the fabric. Thunder rumbled close, then faded. The barn door shook. Something heavy scraped across the wood on the other side, like boots. But when I spun the beam, nothing was there. I grabbed the girl's arm. "Stay close," I said, voice firmer than I felt. She didn't argue. We stepped into the rain together. I led her up the yard path to the cruiser, and she climbed in without a sound. I closed the door, shivered, and realized my jacket was inside. I turned back toward the barn. In the dim glow of the cruiser's brake lights, I saw a shape in the doorway, tall, hulking, head bowed. Then it turned and melted into the darkness. Whoever it was, they didn't run. They just went. I sat in the driver's seat, radio squawking urgently now that dispatch had picked up. I told them we needed EMS, child services, and backup at 216 Oak Ridge. The girl sat on the passenger side seat, knees pulled to her chest, watching me through the windshield. She tapped her finger gently on the glass, echoing the barn's tapping, just once, as if to say we weren't done. I put the cruiser in drive, thinking I'd never slept again under this roof of rain and shadow. And just as we rolled past the mailbox at the road, the radio died again, dead silence. The girl reached out, touched my hand, and whispered, "He'll be back for me." I pulled over, looked at her, and found myself at a loss for words. Then the beam of my flashlight, left on in the barn corner, winked out in the distance. I eased the cruiser onto the slick road, the girl's soft words echoing in my mind. "He'll be back for me." My knuckles went white on the steering wheel. The column of rain hid everything beyond the windshield, only the dull glow of my headlights and the occasional flash of a passing reflector on a fence post. Her hand rested on the console, fingertips cold and still. I wanted to ask her name, but the syllables lodged in my throat. Whatever voice she'd had in that barn, the one that spoke of waiting and forgetting, felt too fragile to disturb. Behind us, the barn receded into shadows. I could still feel that oppressive weight twisting around its doorframe, the sense that someone had been watching us the whole time, then slipped away like mist. I flicked on the dome light for a second. She looked up, face pinched and rain-streaked, eyes rimmed red. I took a breath. "What's your name?" She didn't answer, only tilted her head. So I tried again. "You can tell me." Her gaze dropped to the floor mats. I shut the light off. The radio crackled. "Unit 12, come in." Relief washed through me. I answered, voice low. "Read." "Backup's 2 minutes out. EMS on the way. What's your status?" I gave them the rundown. Child in custody. Possible suspect fled into woods. Barn door unsecured. Pram missing. As I spoke, I realized how automatic it sounded, like I'd narrated it a dozen times already in my head. The operator confirmed and cut the channel. I glanced at the girl again. She swallowed hard, then leaned toward me. "You believe me, right?" Her voice was small, like a bird's trapped cry. "I don't make things up." I debated telling her about the smudged handprint in the kitchen, the charred candle stub, the Polaroid photo in the loft, but those thoughts felt too wild to share, so I just nodded. I believe you. We drove the half-mile back to Highway 23, and then the 2 miles to Grovewood PD headquarters. The station lights glowed through the rain, red and blue reflections rippling across puddles in the parking lot. 2 cruisers idled outside the door, engines off, lights spinning silently in standby. I killed the engine, left my headlamps on to keep the lot lit. I unbuckled and opened my door. She stayed seated, clutching the red fleece jacket I'd handed her in the barn. "Come on," I said softly. She eased out, barefoot now. Her boots must have stayed behind, tiny feet on cold concrete. I draped the jacket over her shoulders. It swallowed her frame. "Let's get you inside." The station smelled of coffee and industrial cleaner. A worn carpet mat read, "Welcome to Grovewood," but it did nothing to soften the sterile feel. 2 deputies rose from behind the front desk as we entered. They stared. The sight of a soaked child in officer's gear, hair plastered to her forehead, was unexpected. I introduced them. Deputy Lawson knelt to her level, offered a gentle smile. "Hey there, I'm Lawson. We'll take care of you, okay?" She blinked, nodded once, and then closed her eyes. I realized she was exhausted, soaked through, and probably terrified. I filled out the initial intake on screen while Lawson fetched a blanket, water, and a dry pair of socks. The girl hugged the blanket tight but wouldn't drink. She just stared at me, as if waiting. I had reports to file and a statement to take. I escorted her to an interview room, a small, gray-walled box with a table bolted to the floor. She climbed into the chair, hunched forward, hands hidden under the fleece. I sat across and left my flashlight on the table, lens aimed at her like a spotlight. The deputies hovered just outside the door. "Name," I said gently. She hummed, throat tight. Anything would help. Silence. I tried another tack. "You said he forgot his coat. Who's he?" Her lips pressed together, then she whispered, "Dad." My chest clenched. Her father, likely the man who'd collapsed by the creek, was the one who'd left her in that barn. But then, why the waiting? Why build a sleeping nest up there and keep her locked in? The door clicked. Deputy Lawson entered carrying a pallet of dry clothes and a cup of water. "Let's get you warmer," Lawson said. She helped her change. The girl disappeared behind a privacy screen for 5 minutes, emerged in jeans and a sweatshirt that dwarfed her tiny frame. She wore Lawson's socks and the same damp jacket. She held a small teddy, one I didn't recognize. No stains, no blood, just a worn toy pressed to her chest. Lawson handed her the water. She sipped and set the cup down carefully, like it might shatter. I swallowed the lump in my throat and took off my own jacket, draped it over the back of my chair. I turned to see a deputy checking reports on a computer. "What's the protocol here?" I asked Lawson. "We notify CPS, get interviews, check local missing persons. You know the drill." I nodded, heart pounding. Everything felt too slow. I glanced back at her. She studied the teddy, then she set it down too. "He said if I cry, he'd come back," she said. I froze. She'd spoken without prompting. "Who?" She looked up, eyes glistening. "The man in the photo. He comes back." She tapped the folded Polaroid I still carried, the one from the barn loft. I palmed it, stared at the worn edges. "You saw him?" She nodded. "Every night." My throat tightened. Back in the cruiser, I'd assumed it was just a keepsake. Now, I didn't know what to think. Deputy Lawson led her down to the break room to wait for CPS. I carried the photo into the hallway, breathed deep. I slipped it into my pocket. My legs felt shaky, an officer's weakness showing. but I couldn't shake the chill. I strode into the squad room where phones rang and printers hummed. The chief was already there, looking up from a stack of call logs. "Reed, what's the situation?" he asked. I summarized: girl found locked in barn, father overdosed nearby, pram missing, footprints too small for adult boots. He frowned. "Lot of pieces. We run her prints through NCIC, do fingerprints on the doll and coat, see if there's any record." He pitched toward me. "You okay?" I met his eyes. Just unsettled. I returned to the hallway to fetch the girl for the medical exam. The corridor was deserted. Night shift. The fluorescent lights buzzed. As I reached for the door's handle, I heard it again. Soft tapping. Like fingernails drumming on my cruiser's hood. I froze, hand half turned on the knob. My heart slammed. I waited, listening. Tap, pause, tap. My skin crawled. I dropped my free hand to the wall. Tapping stopped. I opened the door. She sat on the edge of the exam table, legs swinging. She looked at me. "He's here." I blinked. "Who?" She pointed over my shoulder to the dim hallway. I turned. Nothing but lockers and a broken clock. I looked back. She was gone from the table. I spun, beam of my flashlight through the door's viewport. Empty. Pulse thundering, I stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind me. I couldn't find her. No footprints, no coat, no teddy, just the faint echo of tapping. And the flashlight lying on the floor, lens cracked. My radio burst to life. "Reed, where are you?" "We need you for the exam." My voice trembled. "Head to the exam room. Urgent." I followed the corridor out. The others looked at me, concerned. I picked up the Polaroid from my pocket and held it fast. In it was that family. Smiles frozen in time behind the barn's rafters. I studied the date again, July 2003, but the barn was built in 1978 and abandoned after the last owner left in 1982. How could a family picnic take place there in 2003? I opened my mouth to ask Lawson, but my radio cut out. Dead. The throbbing buzz of the station returned. I clicked it. Nothing. My watch read 1:47. I looked back at the hallway. It was dark now, lights flickering. I felt the tapping in my chest, in my mind, like a call to go back, wait, be patient. Deputy Lawson came up beside me. "Everything all right?" she said. I clenched the Polaroid so tight my knuckles whitened. "No," I said, voice rough. "Something's wrong." I led her to the hallway, but the door to the exam room was ajar. The little girl inside, curled on the gurney, eyes closed, breathing steady. No teddy, no jacket, no trace of the cracked flashlight. The Polaroid slipped through my fingers and fluttered to the floor. I knelt, picked it up. She smiled from behind him, smiled at me. Then my stomach dropped as I noticed she wasn't in the photo before. In front, sitting on her father's knee, wearing that same red coat. My head snapped up. The hallway was empty except for us. But from somewhere above, a distant, deliberate tap, came the sound of a boot striking wood. And I realized I wasn't sure who was waiting anymore. I followed Lawson down the corridor toward the evidence locker. Every step feeling heavier than the last. The station's fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting jittery shadows that crawled along the cinder block walls. I carried the Polaroid in my hand, pressing it flat against my palm so I could read the faded white marker. Family Day, July 2003. My fingers kept tracing the little girl's smile, the damp hooded coat, her father's arm around her shoulder. But I knew she hadn't been in that photo before now, I was sure. At the locker, Lawson typed in the security code and swung the door open. Inside, evidence bags hung neatly, labeled and dated. I slid the Polaroid into a fresh plastic sleeve, taped the edges, and wrote my initials. I paused before sealing it entirely, watching the image through the vinyl. Her face lit by the flash of that disposable camera, the world behind her sunlit and warm. In this station, warmth felt impossible. Lawson cleared her throat. "We've got a doctor waiting in exam room 3, she said. "She says the girl is stable, but wants to check for hypothermia and any injuries." I nodded, carefully closing the locker. Each click of the latch echoed like a shot. I followed Lawson back to the exam room, half expecting the girl to vanish from the gurney again, but she lay there, small and still under the thin sheet. Her chest rose and fell in slow rhythm. No teddy, no jacket, no boots. Dr. Patel glanced up as we entered. She was young, eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, hair pulled into a neat bun. "Officer Reed," she said, checking the girl's pulse. "She's hypothermic, dehydrated, but no trauma. Looks like she hasn't eaten in at least 24 hours. I tightened my jaw. She wouldn't eat before? Dr. Patel shook her head. No food in her system. That barn, she must have been locked in there for days. My mind drifted back to the witness footprints, tiny and large, imprinted in straw and wood. I thought of the handprint on the kitchen backsplash, now smeared and faded by rain. There was a pattern here, something cold and deliberate that I couldn't name yet. Lawson placed a warm blanket over the girl and stepped aside. The girl's eyes fluttered open, and she looked at me. I swallowed. Her gaze held something unsaid, fear or expectation, I couldn't tell. "You've been asleep," I said softly. She nodded. I dreamed of him. My muscles tensed. "Who?" Tears welled in her eyes. "He told me I'd be safer." She blinked. "He's going to come back and finish it." I stifled a gasp. I didn't know what "it" meant, but it sounded horrible. Dr. Patel finished her exam and stepped away. "I'll send someone to keep an eye on her until CPS arrives," she said. Lawson and I left the room, closing the door behind us. In the hallway, I rubbed my eyes. "We need to figure out who this he is," I said. Lawson frowned. "We've got one suspect, the father, but he overdosed and I didn't see anyone else." I shook my head. "That doesn't explain the man in the photo, July 2003, in an abandoned barn, or the pram that was gone when we returned, or the tapping." My voice dropped. Something's still here. We waited in the squad room while forensics processed the barn, the house on Oak Ridge, and my cruiser. The ticking of the clock grew deafening. My notebook lay open on the table with scrawled details. Footprints, handprint, Polaroid, doll's eye, coat, tapping. I tapped my pen in rhythm, half hoping it would satisfy that echo in my mind. But it didn't. Lawson poured 2 coffees and slid one across to me. I sipped mine, bitter and black, and forced my shoulders to relax. The door swung open. Deputy Garcia strode in, holding evidence tags. "We found the coat in a trash bin 50 yards from the barn," he said. No blood, no fibers, no prints. The doll was in the pram under some leaves, intact. One eye missing, the other shattered. Lawson and I exchanged glances. "Anything unusual?" I asked. Garcia hesitated. "Yeah, the pram had a note taped to the handle. Says, 'For her safety, watch the window.' Handwriting looks like the same marker used on the Polaroid." Marker, thick white pen. I closed my eyes, fought the rising adrenaline. "Watch the window," I repeated. "Which window?" Garcia shrugged. "Doesn't say, but the barn loft window was broken, the shutters open." My gut clenched. "So he watches." "Watches what?" The room felt too small. I stood, rubbing my neck. "We need to canvass the neighbors again, see who'd seen anyone coming or going. Check traffic cams on Highway 23. Maybe someone followed us back after we left with her." I added, I'll double back to the barn once forensics is done. Garcia nodded. Be careful, that place gives me the creeps. I forced a laugh. You and me both. By 4:15, forensics gave the all clear. The barn smelled of damp earth and mold. I stepped inside, flashlight in hand, boots sinking into wet straw. Tracks led from the pram's spot under the loft stairs, across the rafters and back down. No sign of adult prints outside that initial one. Tiny footprints everywhere, but only one adult set. I snapped photos, bagged samples of splintered wood, and collected a framed scrap of newspaper from the loft, July 2003 edition, headline about a local fair. The date matched the Polaroid. Someone had lived up here and kept mementos, or staged them. I glanced at the loft trapdoor. The latch was fresh, scratches around the metal plate. I climbed up, crawling into the narrow space where I'd found the photo. The mattress was gone. Just planks with darker stains, old and fresh scratch marks. I pressed my palm to the wood, sticky, old sap, or something else. I swallowed. Behind me, the wall held nails from which hung remnants of what looked like children's clothing. Fragments of a pink dress, a ripped blue sweater. I shone the beam across the loft wall and found initials carved faintly. SR could be Samantha Reed, my grandmother's name. ER could be my own initials. But I never lived here. My breath caught. I knelt and scraped at the letters with my pen. Beneath the carved lines, the wood was lighter, a fresh inscription. Someone wrote my name here in my memory. I stood, stepping back so hard I nearly hit my head on the ceiling. My flashlight bobbled, illuminating a cracked shard of mirror beside the carving. I flipped it around. The glass was fogged, but I saw my reflection. Eyes wide, face drawn, standing in an abandoned barn, looking for ghosts. I heard the tapping again, soft, rhythmic. It came from the walls, the floor, my shoes, nowhere and everywhere. I turned off the flashlight and stood in silence. The tapping stopped. I turned it on again, nothing. I dropped the light and listened. Grains of straw shifting, rain pattering on the metal roof, my heart pounding. I backed toward the trapdoor, dropped to the ladder and climbed down without looking up. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the air still. The moon peeked from behind clouds, casting the barn in pale light. I realized the pram was gone again. The ground around it was clear, no drags, no prints. That pram had been in my cruiser then, back in the barn, then vanished again. It was moving on its own. I climbed into the cruiser and closed the door, heart hammering. The Polaroid lay on the passenger seat, the girl's smile facing me. I rolled down the window just enough to slip the photo out and down toward the mud. It fluttered and then stuck to the windshield wiper. I watched it shake in the breeze. Only the girl remained in the shot. Her parents were faded away. I turned the key. The engine roared to life, but the radio stayed silent. I tapped the wiper, and the Polaroid drifted down into the mud. It sank, colors smudging with earth. I sat for a moment, chest tight, and then put the cruiser in gear. As I pulled away, headlights picked up a pair of tiny footprints in the grass beside the road, leading away into the trees, disappearing at the tree line. No adult print beside them. I kept driving, but every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I thought I saw a small figure standing under the barn's window, watching me go. Maybe I'm not supposed to leave, or maybe she never did. I didn't sleep that night. The road stretched out before me in dark ribbons of asphalt, headlights slicing through mist, but every mile felt like a step backward, toward that barn, toward the girl's hollow eyes. I passed through Grovewood's deserted streets, the neon glow of the coffee shop sign flickering 2 a.m. I tried to reach dispatch again, static. My phone had no signal. Even my cruiser's radio was silent, as if the world had pressed pause on the night. I drove until the GPS whispered I was miles past any sign of life. I turned off onto a narrow lane, tree branches tapping my roof in the windless air. My heart pounded in time with the echoes in my skull. Tapping, tapping. I killed the engine and sat in darkness, waiting. The only sound was my breath and the slow drip of water from the rearview mirror. I glanced at the passenger seat, empty, save for a thin echo of cold air where the girl had sat. I hesitated. Should I turn back? But I knew I would never rest until I returned. When I reached the barn again, the moon was low, casting silver shafts between the slats. The door had been closed behind me earlier, but now it hung wide open. I flicked my flashlight on and stepped inside. The air smelled of damp straw and something older, something decaying but not quite dead. The beam found the footprints in the mud, one large set russet work boots, one small set, too small by half her size, pointing in every direction like a compass gone mad. They led me to the loft ladder. I swallowed and climbed, each rung groaning under my weight. In the loft, the space felt different. The wood floorboards were streaked with darker stains, and fresh footprints, muddy and scattered, led away from the loft's center toward an iron ring in the wall. A length of rope looped through it, frayed and worn. I followed it with my eyes as it twisted down to the ground. The coil lay near the trap door, as if something, or someone, had slipped through and let it drop. My flashlight beam trembled as I stepped closer. I reached out and lifted the rope. It was damp, heavy with moisture. No scent of blood, though I could almost taste iron in the air. I climbed back down, and the barn door slammed shut behind me. I yanked my gun free, pressed my back to the wood, scanned every corner. No one stood there. The girl's doll lay on the hay-strewn floor, missing its second eye entirely now, leaving an empty socket of porcelain that caught a fragment of flashlight glow. I picked it up and heard whispering from somewhere high above, far too quiet to understand words, but urgent, pleading. My ears rang. I dropped the doll. It shattered into pieces I felt more than heard hitting the wood. Instinct pulled me back outside, where the wind had picked up, twirling leaves in miniature whirlwinds. I squinted at the open field beyond the barn and saw movement at the edge of the tree line, a small figure standing just beyond the fence. I called out, voice rough, "Hey, stay where you are." The figure didn't move. Then, impossibly, it raised one arm, pointing back at the barn. I felt a chill when I realized it was the girl, but she looked different. Her coat was fresh and clean, no stains, and her hair didn't drip. Her little face was pale and expressionless. I took a step toward her, and she disappeared into the trees. I hesitated for a heartbeat, then chased after her, boots sliding in wet grass. The forest closed around me, branches snagging my jacket, calls of nocturnal animals. The moonlight fractured through the canopy, turning shadows into living shapes. I heard tapping again, louder, closer, like someone rapping on a hollow log. I veered toward the sound, drawn by a promise of answers. I burst into a clearing and froze. There, resting on an old stump, was the pram, intact, wheels locked, handle pointing toward me. The doll sat inside, cracked socket facing upward. No girl, no footprints around it. I approached, mind racing. I knelt and reached for the doll, when a voice stopped me cold. "Officer Reed." It was gentle, but carried weight. I spun. In the tree line stood a man in a soaked coat, hood drawn low. His face was obscured. but I recognized his bearing. The curve of his shoulders, the tilt of his head. My heart slammed. It was me. I took a step back. He stepped forward. Now I could see his face in slivers of moonlight. My face, older and worn, eyes dark with sorrow. My reflection from the cracked mirror in the loft come to life. I steadied my gun on the replica of myself. "Who are you?" I demanded, voice trembling. He smiled, a slow, sad smile. "I'm you," he said. "The you left behind." My hand shook. "This isn't real?" He nodded, eyes glinting. "You left her, Officer Reed. You thought you could drive away and forget, but she stayed. She needed you." I swallowed, mind reeling. I never left her. He raised a hand, and the pram behind him rattled. The doll's torso spun in its seat like a top. "You did?" He pointed at the doll. "You snapped her world in two when you took her here, then took yourself away in the night. You kept the photo, your proof that she existed. But you never stayed to answer her question." I felt tears sting my eyes. "What question?" He reached into his coat and pulled out a Polaroid. The same Family Day, July 2003 image I'd found. But now it was different. The parents worn away, leaving only the girl smiling alone. He held it close. "The question only she can ask," he said softly. "And you have to answer." I glanced down. The doll in the pram had cracked fully now, its head tilted at an impossible angle, glass eyes staring at me with malice. The wind whispered through the trees, syllables I almost understood. "Why did you leave me alone?" The girl's voice echoed in my soul. And then, in a movement too quick to process, the figure of me vanished. The doll toppled from the pram, and the Polaroid floated upward out of my hand, spinning like a leaf caught in a draft. I fell to my knees, gasping. The pram creaked shut, straps tightening, as if latching onto some presence. The tapping resumed, steady, insistent, now beneath my boots, inside my chest. I crawled backward toward the barn, leaving the pram behind, leaving the doll pieces scattered like broken promises. I raced inside, slammed the door, and bolted it with a length of rope still hanging on the wall. In the loft, I found the mirror shard leaning against the beams. I lifted it and saw the girl's face behind mine, her small mouth open in a silent plea. Tears blurred the glass. I pressed my forehead to the beam beside the carving SR and realized the initials shifted beneath my gaze. ER. The girl's reflection lingered behind mine, smiling. Then her eyes flicked to the corner where the Polaroid should have been, gone again. The barn door creaked, as if someone turned the handle. I whipped around, heart racing, gun drawn, and found only darkness. I whispered her name, voice cracking. The tapping stopped. Silence pressed in so thick I could taste it. Then, across the loft, a single footprint appeared in dust. Tiny, fresh, heading toward me. I didn't run. I couldn't. I watched as it paused an arm's length away, then trained itself on that nail-inscribed initials. And I realized I never left her. I only thought I did.